I was going into middle school when my parents told me they were splitting up. As a kid, you see other families split up, but you never think it could happen to your own family. When my parents first told me about the divorce, I was just like any other kid. I was confused and angry. I didn't understand what was happening, and I just wanted my family to be a family again. As time went on, I became less angry. I began asking more questions and realizing different things. Hearing every fight and listening to parents talk down to each other is not just scarring, but terrifying. I understand that once two people fall out of love, it's hard to fall back into it. However, that doesn't mean that it's impossible. I know that the decision to get divorced doesn't just happen overnight, but maybe it would be easier to try and remember what led you to get married in the first place. I didn't understand why this was happening, or what we did to make my dad not want to live with us anymore. How was I, a little girl, going to tell my friends that the reason I can't have a play date was because my dad moved out and I was spending the weekend with him? A million questions raced in my head all at the same time. My life was about to change dramatically, and I didn't even know how to deal with it. My name is Chloe, and this is my story. For most girls, including myself, your mom is the biggest inspiration in your life. She's the one you can always count on to cheer you up. After the divorce, my mom wasn't herself anymore. One day, I came back from school and I saw her standing in front of the tall mirror in the living room and crying. I tried to hold her, but she pretended that she was fine. I have a younger brother. His name is Adam, and he's only 8 years old. I'm now 15. Adam is not aware of what's happening. He might be in denial. Anyways, it was my first year in high school, and I was so excited. But sadly, my mom wasn't. She used to be so full of life, and I kept wondering what had gotten into her. Maybe the divorce, but that was a couple of years ago. Everything at home was just dramatic. We even spent 2 days without food because we had little money. And my mom got fired from her job. Well, my dad sends us money, but it barely covered the bills. It was summertime, and me and my best friend Kim decided to take a part-time job. I told my mom, and she barely smiled. But I was focused on getting away from all the drama and saving money. We both got jobs at the mall in a perfume shop. Well, between you and me, there was another reason I wanted the job. There is this guy called Liam who also works at the mall, and I have a huge crush on him. The day I got my first paycheck, Kim came home with me. We were laughing and having a good time. We wanted to take a selfie with the first money we ever earned. My mom was in the background, and she jumped up and moved out of the picture. Later that night, I finally had the courage to ask my mom what was going on. I said, "Mom, why did it jump out of the picture earlier?" My mom paused for a while and said, "I just don't like pictures, Chloe." And that was quite shocking because my mom loves pictures. We have tons of photo albums. I went upstairs to call Kim. Well, we discussed work, Liam, school, and finally my mom. Next day at work, our boss offered a huge bonus to whoever sells more than 5 bottles of perfume. And guess who took the bonus? Of course I did. Right after my shift ended, Kim was still wrapping up with a customer while I waited for her. Liam waved at me. I blushed so hard and I waved back. He came over and asked for my number. He was about to say something, but Kim was done with the customer. Liam texted me that night. He asked me if I was free on the weekend. My eyes turned into literal hearts, and I said yes. Liam and I are officially going out on a date. I ran downstairs to tell my mom the good news. I took the bonus, and I have a date. I was just happy that something could finally take my mind off the divorce. However, I found my mom staring at the mirror again. I told her the news and everything. She already knows about Liam. I thought she would get excited, but she silently hugged me and said goodnight. Next morning, I went to work feeling all happy. Also, Kim promised we would go shopping for my big night with Liam. We finished work and went into a fancy shop to try on a few outfits. I picked out a white skirt and a pink blouse, and I looked perfect. I went back home and I wanted to show my new outfit to my mom. I found Adam doing his homework on the kitchen floor, and I asked him, Adam, where is Mom? He replied, I don't know, she left in the morning with a big bag. Now, what does that mean? Should I call my dad? I spent half of my paycheck on the new outfit. So I just went up to my room to grab some money and go to my dad's place. To my surprise, I couldn't find my money, not even a penny. I went into my mom's room and half of her closet was gone, which explains the big bag Adam was talking about. I called Kim and I was freaking out. I told her to come over. Kim came over and told me that I had to call my dad. And that just felt awkward. I mean, I love my dad and everything, but we're not close. I haven't seen him for a while, and we never really talk on the phone. But I had to do what I had to do, and so I called him. Hey dad, it's me, Chloe. He replied, Hey kiddo, long time no see. I said, yeah, Dad, I can't find Mom. My dad went silent for a moment there and then said, What do you mean you can't find her? Have you called her? I replied back, Her phone is in her room, Dad, and Adam says she left in the morning. My dad said he will come over. Kim and I went up to my mom's room and I found a note on her bed. The note said, I'm sorry, Chloe. I'm at the hospital. I promise I'll pay you back. By that time, my dad had arrived. Why did everything get so complicated? Why is my mother like that? Me, my dad, Kim, and Adam, we all went to the hospital together. My dad spoke to the receptionist and said, I'm here for Charlotte White. Where is she, please? The woman replied, She's getting ready for her surgery. I said, What surgery? The woman replied back, This is confidential information, I'm sorry. I screamed at her and said, I'm her daughter. Now tell me where is my mom? Another woman stepped in and said, I'm so sorry, Mrs. White is getting ready in room 104. And we all went up to the room. We found Mom in a white hospital gown, ready for anesthesia. I sat down next to her and Dad just stood there. Mom, what's wrong? My mom didn't answer my question. She just started crying. Dad took Adam outside the room and left us alone. Mom said, I'm just getting my face and a few things fixed. I'm getting a facelift, Chloe. I said nothing back. When she's the one I can always count on to cheer me up, now what am I supposed to do? Imagine the shock and confusion when this strong woman, my mother, a strong single mother, is paying thousands of dollars for someone to take a knife to the very face that comforted me the first time I fell off my bike and cried when I got sick. For the last year, she has refused to be in pictures because she's so obsessed with her laughter lines and chubby cheeks. So, ever the problem solver, she has decided to do something about it. But it's a horrible turn of affairs that her solution will hospitalize her for 2 days and leave her with deep scars behind her ears. My heart just sank. I couldn't believe she felt so bad about her face. I imagined the hours she must have spent alone, gazing sadly into that mirror, wishing away features that, to me at least, are totally beautiful. Why would something so extreme be necessary for her to be happy with how she looks? This was the first time I had seen her without makeup on in as long as I could remember. She looked tired and nervous. Well, we were both bundles of nerves, but I tried to make small talk to distract her from the dawning reality that she was facing major surgery. There was no way of talking her out of it. After 2 days, Dad took me and Adam to visit her. As we entered the recovery room, the first thing she said was, I wish I hadn't done it. She had a tight, swollen face, thick purple scars running down the sides of her neck, and was being attended by 2 nurses. They were showing her how to put on the head straps she had to wear for the next 2 weeks. Why did I do this? She repeatedly asked me. I wanted to cry, though at this point all I could do was thank the nurses, pick up my mom's bags, and most importantly, reassure her that I'm sure she would look amazing. When she was in the hospital, she had noisy machines attached to her for 48 hours, and that made it difficult to sleep. And worst of all, she felt trapped and helpless. The week after the operation, she seemed sad, drained, and confused. She slept badly because she couldn't lie down and felt a lot of pain around her head caused by the clips holding her wounds in place. I'm sure you're going to look fantastic when it's all healed, I told her over and over again. A week later, I went with her to have her stitches removed. The surgeon said, "Mrs. White, your body thinks it's been hit by a train, so it's normal to feel woozy at this stage." I looked at my mom and told her, "Promise me that this is the last time you put yourself in so much risk like that." And before she could even say anything back, she looked at the surgeon and told him, "I'd like to talk to you about liposuction around my middle. When's the soonest you can fit me in? And my mom will have yet another operation next month. I will have to go through the whole miserable process again, with no assurance that this procedure will be the one to finally make her happy with the way she looks." We went back home. My mom stood in front of the same mirror, still not looking happy. I just went upstairs and texted Liam a long apology because I bailed on him. Well, my mom and I never discussed the money she took from me. All I know is that the face that will look back at me over lunch or at my prom won't be her face anymore. It will be a synthetic version of her, reimagined and sculpted by a doctor promising her the self-esteem she was so desperately seeking. This experience has left me with one unanswered question. What is she really spending all this money and heartache trying to fix? And no, I will not be discussing what her new face looks like, because the main thing is that it doesn't look like my mom.
Hello, I'm Dahlia. Naturally, it's every girl or boy's dream to get employed after they graduate and start their practical life. And that's what happened to me. Right after I graduated, I found the perfect job. I was hired as a graphic designer. As you all know, on the first day of work, we want everything to be perfect. We get ready. We arrive there early just to show them that we're diligent and hardworking. So I got everything ready the day before it, just in case. My clothes were ironed, the colors matched, my shoes polished. It was all good. Though it was only 11 p.m. when I went to sleep. Thought I'd get a fresh start in the morning, but I wasn't sleepy at all. I'm used to staying up all night. So I got up and I started watching The Fault in Our Stars. A romantic movie was bound to make me fall asleep. The movie was over after I cried through it, and I didn't feel the tiniest bit sleepy. Anyway, I ended up sleeping at 6 a.m. after a long night, and I was supposed to wake up at 8 because my work started 10. When I opened my eyes, I checked the time. 9:30? Oh no! I flew off my bed, jumped in the shower, got dressed, and ran out the door. I took my car, but there were traffic jams everywhere. It was a half-hour drive to work, and the traffic wasn't moving. I lost all reason, yelling at people hysterically, telling them to move out of the way. Finally, they started moving. Oh, it's not over yet. What better to make things worse than a flat tire on the highway? And not a single person stopping to help. So, for the first time in my life, I'm changing my car's tire. Needless to say that the clothes I prepared for hours were all black and so messed up. But I hurried off to work anyway. I got there at noon. I wasn't really sure if I should go up. I'm 2 hours late on my first day. I stood there fretting. Is my first day going to be my last? I'm so late and I look like heck. I checked my bag and I found my makeup kit. It was worth a try. I took my bag and I ran to the door, asking where the bathroom was. I tried my best to make it work. I took off my jacket. Well, it was better than before. All I wanted was to go to work looking like a human. I went to the secretary and I told her I was supposed to start today. She went in to tell the manager I had arrived, and that was it. I heard screaming and shouting. Where does she think she is? How dare she show up 2 hours late on her first day of work? She's fired! Where is she? The door opened and he stormed out. So handsome, so elegant. His tie went perfectly with his suit, and he just stood there staring at me. Then quietly he said, "Please, come in." His secretary looked confused. We sat in the office for about 2 hours. Or was it 3? I lost track of time. I started work that day. Turns out he was my neighbor. So we started going to work together, meaning of course I wouldn't have to change the tires again. But my life started changing too, a little at a time, and my work was going great. Ian was a great boss, and I felt like it was the perfect place for me. 4 months later, Ian proposed. I can't tell you how happy I was. We got married and now we have 2 kids, a girl and a boy. We still work together, helping the company grow. My first day at work wasn't the perfect beginning, but it certainly led to the perfect ending. If there's anything I've learned, it's to do your best, even if it seems impossible. Our feelings are always hard to control. We are humans after all. Sometimes we do things we can't explain, just because we feel that way. I had a student named Daniel, a sweet and innocent child. I was prepared to do anything for him, but don't judge me just yet. First, let me tell you my story. My name is Jolene. I'm a 21-year-old math teacher at a primary school. I live with my sister and my mother. My house was next to the school where I work. I love teaching, and I like teaching the students in creative ways. They loved me, and I loved them. Daniel was a special student, though. Our story began at the start of the new year. It was the first day of school. I missed all my students over the summer break. I missed them so much that I stood by the door to welcome them back. Before I started my first lesson, Mr. Smith, the student affairs officer, knocked on the class door, with Daniel hiding behind his back. Mr. Smith greeted the class and asked them to greet Daniel, but Daniel was too shy and didn't move. So I went over to him to take him by the hand, but he pulled his hand away, which embarrassed Mr. Smith. I asked him to greet his classmates, so he went and he stood in front of the class and he said, "Hello, I am Daniel." Then he went and he sat at the very back of the class. He didn't talk much with the other kids. He didn't like to interact with anyone. Daniel always looked sad, and I thought to myself, he's only 8. What could possibly have made him that way? I tried to get close to him, but he resisted all my efforts. Sometimes he looked like he was hiding some big secret, and later on, I learned what it was. One night, when I was surfing the social media, I came across a horrible news story about a jealous husband killing his wife and another man right in front of his son. The child had been none other than my new student Daniel. Reading that sad story, I started understanding why Daniel was acting that way. I decided to try brightening his life a little. Every day, I would buy a small present and put it on his desk. At first, it had no effect, but slowly he came to love that. During break time, I would sit beside him, and we would share food together. I would get him involved in class activities. On his birthday, I arranged a surprise party with his class, his grandmother, and myself. He was so happy that day. After the party, he hugged me and he told me that he loved me. I hugged him tightly. He was not just a student to me. I treated him like he was my own son. He told me that he wanted to call me mother, and that made me so happy. After his grandmother died, he came to live with me. We faced a lot of problems together, but I followed his success in life with pride. Daniel is all grown up now. He's graduating from the Faculty of Engineering. I am so proud of what he has made of himself.
Falling in love with a knight in shining armor riding on a white stallion is the dream of every girl. I would want him to be tall, blonde-haired, green-eyed, handsome, and strong. Imagine him along with me if you can. But what I never expected in a million years was to actually meet my knight in shining armor. Lend me your ear and listen to my knight's tale. My name is Meredith, and I'm 17 years old. I live with my mom and my little sister Susan, who is 3 years younger than me. Susan and I fight a lot, as sisters are wont to do. She is more beautiful than me. I am short and fat, but don't blame me. You should blame my mother for being an excellent cook. She used to work in a famous restaurant. You can't imagine how tasty her food is. Mom uses me as her laboratory rat or guinea pig. Whenever she cooks any new dish, she has me try it out and give her my opinion. As a result of all my taste testing, I've become an obese food addict. I know that my obesity may be an obstacle in finding my heroic knight. My best friends are Ellen, Selena, and Mary. My first date was with a guy named Mark. He was a crazy one. Torn clothes, long, dirty hair, a furtive manner. And his paranoid eyes were always darting around, looking everywhere. At our first meeting, he gave me a silly present that, when open, sprang a fake frying pan into my face. My next meeting was with Michael. He was subdued and weird. On our first date, he sat silent for 2 hours and barely spoke at all. All my friends' matchmaking attempts failed miserably. Then Ellen suggested that I open a Facebook account and try to find my dream mate online. I didn't like the idea at first, but I took a chance, opened an account, and shared some personal information about myself and my interests. My first friend request was from Mark. Yeah, that Mark. I blocked his request immediately. I received more friend requests from various people, some interesting, some plain and boring. I kept waiting for my knight on a white horse to send me a friend request. Then one day, I got a friend request from a boy named Joaquin. I visited his Facebook page and saw that he was handsome and active in sports. I accepted his request and sent him a message to say hello and waited all night for his response. Just when I was about to lose hope, he surprised me and responded. I tried to control myself even though my mind was already racing ahead and planning our wedding. We chatted online that day for around 3 hours. I told him about my family, hobbies, etc. But eventually he had to excuse himself to go to an exercise class. However, he promised that he would continue our chat later. I sent him a rolling on the floor laughing emoji and asked, "Are you serious?" He replied, "Of course, I want to get to know you better." I called my friends and told them everything. They advised caution, but I didn't listen to them. In my mind, I had already fallen in love with Joaquin. I clutched my phone, waiting for his next message with bated breath. I figured that I should probably let him know what I really looked like, a fat food addict, before we got too far into a relationship. When he got home, he sent me a message, and I asked him about himself and his family. He told me about his dreams, his family, and his dream girl. He told me that he wasn't interested in a girl's figure at all. The important thing was her character. We agreed to meet the next day. I was excited. I called my friends immediately and update them on my news. Later, I received a message from Joaquin stating the time and place of our upcoming meeting. I chose some chic clothes and got ready to go. Mom saw me and was surprised that I had dressed up so. Susan laughed at me. "She looks like she's going to a restaurant," said my darling little sister. I announced, "I am going on a date, Mum. I met someone on Facebook." Mum said, "Okay, have a good time, and come back and tell us all about it when you return." My heart was beating in my ears as I raced to our meeting place. After I arrived, I sent Joaquin a message telling him that I was waiting for him outside. He replied that he had prepared a surprise for me and that I should come inside. So I hurried inside to see what surprise he had planned. My mind ran wild with possibilities. When I entered the place, I saw my friends holding up a banner with my name on it. Ellen said, "Don't be upset, Meredith, but your surprise is that we are Joaquin." They had played a prank on me as a birthday surprise. Oh, I was so angry. "Do you mean to tell me that Joaquin, the love of my life, was all a hoax? You are not my friends. You are devils." But then Ellen opened a box and showed me its contents. A nice, big, plump, glazed blueberry tart. I stopped my angry ranting. My mouth closed. I became silent and calmed down. My heartbeat rate slowed. They all hugged me. They said that I was a beautiful girl, and they had just wanted to make me happy for my birthday. I was stuffing the blueberry tart in my mouth when the waiter came to take our orders. I looked at him with a mouthful of food. He was so handsome. I mumbled, "What's your name?" as I was chewing my mouthful of blueberry tart. Try again, as they say.
We all enjoy watching horror movies. The fear, the torture, the suspense, the excitement. We have to watch them to the end to see if the evildoers get what they deserve. We love this kind of excitement from time to time. It interrupts our boring daily routine. We watch movies that excite and terrify, that stir our emotions, spark our imagination, present what-if situations. We imagine what we would do if faced with the same situation in real life. I never really thought that I would actually have to go through something like that, though. My name is Sola. I'm 14 years old. I live with my mom and my brother. My father left us long ago, and we don't know where he went or anything else about him. Mom lost hope and gave up trying to find him. She decided to raise us alone. My brother Carl and I were best friends. He trusted me with all his secrets. We didn't have any relatives, and very few people came to visit us. One day, Mom received a phone call, and as she was talking, her face changed. Suddenly, she seemed afraid. She saw me coming and tried to force a smile on her face, but I noticed, and I heard her say, "Yes, it's the same address. When did you leave the hospital?" "Sure, sure, I'll wait for you." I wondered why Mom was so nervous, and I asked her, "Who were you talking to?" She told me that she was talking to her brother, and I thought, "Brother? You never told us you had a brother." Then she explained that her brother had left a long time ago and had just returned. She told me that he was coming to visit us tomorrow. I didn't know why Mom would have kept her brother a secret from us, but I was still excited to meet my uncle. Carl was at summer camp, which meant that he was going to miss meeting Uncle. Too bad. The next day, Mom cleaned the house and told me not to speak too much with Uncle because he didn't like talkative people. When Uncle arrived, Mom and I welcomed him. He was handsome, with long, soft blonde hair and an amazing smile. He told Mom that I was so beautiful, but Mom seemed worried rather than pleased upon hearing this. Uncle was so funny, and I loved him. He told me a lot of stories about Italy and other places. After a short time, he had to leave. I didn't want him to go, but he insisted. He said that he would see me again soon. Mom seemed horrified. I looked at her and asked her what was wrong, but she didn't answer. She just held her right arm. I thought it was very strange. Even stranger still, later that night, after I had gone to bed, I was startled when Mom woke me in the middle of the night to warn me never to accept any invitation from Uncle, even if it was just to go for a walk together. I thought that was very odd and asked her why, but she said that she would explain everything later. Next day, she went to visit my brother and take him some stuff that he needed. Before she left, she looked at me for a second, then she warned me not to go out alone. A while after she had left, the doorbell rang, and I opened it. Uncle was standing there. He asked where Mom was, and I told him she had gone out to do some errands. I asked him to come in, but he refused. As he was leaving, he hesitated and turned around and asked me if I would like to go to get some ice cream with him at a park. I recalled Mom's warning, but I thought to myself, he's my uncle. What's the worst that could happen? So I shrugged off Mom's warning and I went with him. I was glad I did because we had a great time, laughing and eating. He even told me some more stories. At some point during our talking, he looked up at the sky and said, "What beautiful birds." I looked up to see what he was looking at, when suddenly I felt something like a needle jab in my neck. Then all went out. I woke up to find myself in a deserted place against the wall with my hands tied over my head. Uncle was sitting on a chair with a strange collection of tools in front of him. His expression wasn't friendly at all, and he had a scary look on his face. I asked him where I was and what he was doing, but all he said was not to worry, that we were going to have some fun together. He then emphasized that the important thing for me to know was that screaming wasn't allowed. He asked me if I was ready for a simple test, but before I could reply, I felt a red-hot branding iron pressed against my leg. Contrary to his cautionary instructions, I screamed. In fact, I screamed a lot and very loudly. But instead of being angry, he just laughed and said that he loved to hear people scream. Then I lost consciousness from the pain. I woke up to a shocking splash of cold water. He told me that it was much too early to start fainting yet. Then he grabbed a cattle prod. He put it against my arm. I gasped and couldn't breathe due to the electric shock. I screamed some more, shouting between ragged breaths, "Are you crazy? What do you want from me?" He slapped me hard across the face and said, "This is my revenge, and you're the unfortunate recipient of it." Then he slowly but gently dragged the sharp tip of the knife across my face, with a gleeful look on his face, and said, "How would you like to have a nice, pretty scar?" Then he stabbed my arm with his knife, and I screamed again, and again he laughed. He was ecstatic, and began jumping around like an excited monkey. I didn't know if it was day or night. All I knew was that every time I would pass out with pain, I would wake up to more torture, with a new tool for him to play with. How many days must I endure this madness, I thought. Despite my agony and suffering, I thought about Carl and Mom. Then, one day, he stood in front of me and began crying. He said that all of this was because of my mother. He told me that he had only been playing with Mom when he stabbed her in the arm, and that he had only meant to scare her a little, that she really shouldn't have summoned the police to have him arrested and committed to an asylum. He said he couldn't forgive her for that he can't trick or harm her again, so he decided to harm me instead. Then he smashed my knee with a hammer, and I lost consciousness again. When I woke up, he was gone. This was my chance to escape. But how? I tried pulling my hands out of the ropes. Though it chafed my skin painfully, I was able to free my hands. I was shocked to see how badly injured I was. I clumsily clambered up the ladder with my smashed kneecap, but found the door had a big lock on it. I retrieved his hammer and managed to smash open the lock. I found myself exiting an outside storm cellar that led up to a garden where an old car was parked. I hobbled out onto the nearby road and flagged the car. The driver stopped for me, and after seeing my desperate condition, he looked very concerned and asked me what had happened. I eased myself into his car and told him just to drive anywhere away from here. Then I would tell him everything. It was nighttime when he delivered me to my home. I knocked on the door, and Carl opened it. When he saw what a bleeding, tortured mess I was, he screamed and began wailing. He hugged me while I called for Mom. She woke up, came to me, saw my condition, and began crying profusely while hugging me tightly. I told them everything that had happened and apologized to Mom for not heeding her advice. I asked them how many days I'd been gone, and I was shocked to know that my horrific ordeal had lasted 90 days. We called the police, and I took them to the cellar I was held prisoner in, but Uncle was long gone. Now I know Mom's secret, why she was afraid when he called, why she held her arm in Uncle's presence, why she warned me not to go anywhere with him. If only she had told me why, things might have been different. I have lived in fear of everything since that day. Recently, I received a letter. It only made matters worse. It said, "This isn't over yet, until we meet again." Mom and I had the sick feeling that he was still watching us, waiting for an opportunity to take his revenge. So we moved to a city far away to start a new anonymous life, to try and put this horrible experience behind us forever, even if it did haunt our every waking hour.
Every little girl is supposed to want to grow up to be a beautiful princess. How can you blame her? She grows up knowing that a glass slipper from the prince will change her destiny. She also knows that she may fall into a deep slumber only to be rescued by a princess kiss. Let's not forget the fairest of them all. She manages to be loved for cleaning after 7 short men. Wow, the world we have created for our beautiful creatures. I watched all these cartoons. I imagined my prince choosing me over all of the others. I imagined dancing across the ballroom while everyone's eyes followed my graceful steps. I was the envy of every ball in every childhood fantasy. These fantasies were quite a contrast to my reality at home. Now, allow me to elaborate before you jump to conclusions. I had a fantastic childhood. From as young as I can remember, my mother kept my hair short. As a toddler, this meant wild red curls. The majority of my pictures were of me in funny poses. One with my father's big glasses, another with ketchup all over my face, and another swinging off a gate at our home. There are very few pictures where I'm sitting like a pretty proper girl with perfect clips in my hair. In fact, I remember always getting scraped and having yet another bruise on my knee. As I got a little older, my classmates had perfect pigtails and long ponytails or fancy clips. I remember looking at the flowing locks of hair wishing I had the same, but I had a boy cut. Yes, famously known as the Diana cut. Surprisingly, I looked nothing like Princess Diana. Instead, I looked like a skinny boy with bruised knees and short black hair wearing a dress. In fact, I once went on a strike and refused to go to the salon, so my mom was forced to grow out my hair. I think I lost the battle when I started looking like a philosopher with sideburns and thick hair on top. According to my mom, it was so I could enjoy being a kid. so I could run, jump, swing from the monkey bars without having to worry about a ponytail or braids getting undone. Finally, I started looking like a girl. Nonetheless, it was a long journey. I still was not able to do what other teenage girls did. For some reason, I was not allowed to wear lip gloss, blush, or mascara. Instead, I would get a face cream, some nice clothes, and I was sent on my way. This actually lasted all the way to high school. I finally put on eyeliner during senior year in high school and also experimented with lipstick. But by then, all the girls were way ahead of me. They had been putting on makeup for years. They knew what foundation, blush, concealer, and primer was. I was just getting started. There was no way I could catch up. After all, I just realized I could straighten my hair. So, I am assuming when you hear the scenario I describe, you feel very sorry for me. I sound like a plain Jane feeling like an ugly duckling when all she needed was a pretty set of pigtails and lip gloss. Well, here is the catch. I never felt ugly, and never even knew I was a plain Jane. I never felt like I needed lip gloss, and I certainly never felt like I needed any concealer to conceal anything, ever. Other than wanting long locks of hair, I was simply perfect in my mind. In fact, now that I look at pictures of the plain Jane, I'm so surprised about how pretty I felt inside. I only know that because I was able to try so many new things, take risks, and excel in so many different things in school that I must have honestly thought I was pretty amazing all the way around. I'm not saying this to brag. I'm simply analyzing how a plain Jane surrounded by beauty queens managed to be well-rounded, extremely confident young girl. I did see not myself the way I see myself in those photos now. Now that I know the power of concealer, blush, and eyeliner, I also did not see myself perhaps how others saw me. I saw me how my mother saw me. My mother never called me beautiful. In fact, she never called anyone beautiful. My mother only talked about other girls as smart, funny, classy, or confident. Thus, naturally, I started to appreciate those qualities in other girls and wanted to develop myself to be a girl with such attributes. Thus, in turn, others responded to me in kind. I thought I had it all, and knowing that I knew that, they believed it too. What a lesson for life. Beautiful was powerless to me. It was a word that had no value in my mother's eyes. It was a happy accident and perhaps it was never impressed upon in my home. When I look at pictures as a teenager, I see the brilliance of it all. The calculated strategy of my mother imposed on me to help me gain inner confidence without relying on my exterior. In fact, it was not until I reached adulthood, mid-20s, did I realize how others viewed me physically. It was through the eyes of strangers that I realized how much people really respond to and judge you on your looks. Luckily, I had blossomed from a plain Jane to someone who understood the power of makeup by then. It was actually a disheartening reality, especially when I realized that older women analyze the beauty of younger girls. Women are unnecessarily tough on other women. Perhaps it is because a lot of women have been victims of the cycle themselves, always feeling that they were not pretty enough. Just last week, my mother was casually telling me why I had a boycott when I was 4. It went beyond the fact that she wanted me to run and jump without hair in my face. She simply said, "You looked so cute. The short hair was part of your charm." How wonderful I feel even now to hear those words. My mother really thought that, even as a child, her daughter's charm was the most important thing. I have beautiful curls, and I let them run wild. They jump as I jump, and I can only hope I always feel beautiful in the same way my mother made me feel beautiful, by never saying it out loud.
My name is Nathan. I'm a 40-year-old businessman who runs an import-export company. I lived with Mom and Dad and my brother Sam. Some siblings coexist peacefully, some fight all the time, and some hate each other. Sam and I ended up in this latter category because our decisions shape our lives. Let me tell you our story. I worked hard and made good decisions to be successful in life. This contrasted with my lazy brother who wanted easy money without having to work for it. This was a sore point between us. We fought all the time, and the situation was exacerbated by Dad's unexpected death by heart attack. Sam and I took over Dad's business and became partners. Soon, though, Sam thought the business was too much work, so he decided to work abroad for bigger wages and less work, presumably. I begged him to work locally and stay close to the family, but he couldn't be persuaded. So he gave up his share in the business and left to work abroad, and I ran the business as sole proprietor. As I gained experience and business acumen, the business prospered and grew as I earned the customer's trust. As my profits grew, Mom and I moved into a bigger house. Mom wanted me to get married and have kids, and I wanted to make her wish come true. So I found a beautiful girl and married her. She was a blessing to us. When she became pregnant, Mom was ecstatic. We learned that it would be a baby boy, so we chose a name for him, John. As her pregnancy progressed from trimester to trimester, the strain on her body was obvious, but finally, the baby was born, and Mom and I were thrilled to see her only grandchild and my only child, respectively, growing up day by day. I wanted to teach him everything, and I wanted him to be brave. Our lives were content, peaceful, and fulfilled. At one point, I decided to grow the company by opening up some more stores. It was a challenging project, but was necessary to remain competitive with our rivals. Our wealth and good fortune continued to grow, and I bought a new villa for us. Mom, wife, and son. One evening shortly after that, we invited friends over to celebrate moving into our new villa. As we were celebrating, friends were wishing us the best. John was playing and running around everywhere and being a little naughty at times, and everything was going smoothly. Then suddenly, the lights went out for a couple of minutes, and then came back on. This was unusual, but not wanting to worry the guests, I told them that it was a normal glitch that happened once in a while. Still, as a precaution, I called for all the children to gather around me. All were present, except for John. We searched everywhere for him, but couldn't find him. We were all worried about what had happened to him. Then, one of my friends shouted that there was a phone call for me. When I took the phone, a voice on the other end said, "Don't worry about your little prince. He's okay, and he'll stay that way as long as you send us $100,000. Otherwise..." Then the caller hung up. My friends tried to calm me down, but I was frantic with worry. Who would want to kidnap my son? If I gave them the money, what assurance did I have that they would return my son? Then I got angry. They needed to be punished for this heinous deed. So I called a friend who was a police officer and asked him for help. He said he could put a small tracking device in the money bag so they could track my movements and hopefully catch these kidnap for ransom thugs. While it was a neat plan, it was also extremely dangerous if the kidnappers were to find out and escape from our trap. After a couple of days, the thugs called and told me where to meet them with the money. It was a location in the northern part of the country, a forest with dense trees and tall grass, a place that would be easy to escape into and hide. So I got the money, put it in the car, and drove to the agreed-upon meeting place. When I reached the location, a car was there waiting. I parked close to it and exited the car with the money bag in hand. The driver of the other car stepped out. It was Sam. "Sam? I thought you were working abroad," I said. "I was, but the work was too hard, so I quit and came back," Sam replied. "How can you kidnap and ransom your own nephew?" I asked. Sam laughed and said, "You misunderstand. I've just returned to take my share of the money." "What money are you talking about?" I asked. Sam sneered. "The money you took from me in running Dad's business." I tried to connect the dots. I said, "Sam, you were half owner of the business, but then you gave up your ownership to go work abroad. You haven't done anything to earn any money from the business." Sam kept sneering. "I want my share of the profits. Shut up, give me the money, and you'll get your son back. I gave him the money, he released John, and John ran into my arms crying. I asked John if Sam had hurt him, but he said no. After Sam took possession of the money, the police revealed themselves and moved in to surround us. Using a megaphone, they commanded him to surrender, but he ran into the woods instead. The policemen closed in and pursued him, but they lost him in the woods. He had escaped. I returned home with John, and my wife hugged him and cried tears of joy that he had been returned safe and unharmed. Mom asked me who did this. I hesitated. Should I tell her the truth? I decided to do so. She was horrified. A few days later, I received a letter. It was from Sam asking if I was ready for the next payment of my debt to him. I was dismayed and fearful at the same time. Sam had decided to be a villain against his own family, and I had decided to fight back against him tooth and nail. Decisions shape our lives.
One of the best feelings in the world for any woman is being a mother. To have someone love you for who you are, for just being you, and expect nothing in return. You're the heroine of their story. You become everything they ever dreamed, and you'd give anything to see a smile on their face. I'm proud to say that I'm a mother to 50 kids. I know that's a lot, but let me tell you the story. I'm Susan, 20 years old. I come from a very rich family. My dad's Stefan Heiss, a very famous businessman. Yes, the owner of Heiss Cars Industry. My mom's Elena. She comes from a very rich family in Sweden. She married my dad and they built their life from scratch. I loved kids, ever since I was a kid. Sometimes I feel like they're walking cotton candy. Their laughs, their mischief. All the kids in our family loved me, and I loved them. Even my aunts said that I'd make a great mother someday. So did Henry. Henry was my childhood friend. We grew up together. We had the same interests, same hobbies. We even thought alike. We got married and started our life together. We were young, but our dreams were big. I was thrilled when I found out that I was pregnant, and Henry was so happy he couldn't believe it. He did everything he could to help me relax. He couldn't wait to be a father. But destiny had something else in store for us. We had just arrived from Sweden. Henry had a problem at work. He was talking on the phone while driving at high speed on a dangerous road. I tried to tell him to watch the road, but it was too late. A truck came out of nowhere and pushed our car off the side. We fell into the lake, and we were unconscious. When I woke up, I found my mother and Henry's mother both looking at me, trying their best not to cry, and I soon found out why. In order to save my life, they put me through an operation. Not only have I lost my child, but I won't be able to have one ever again. Henry was also bruised, but my wounds ran way deeper. That was it, and I could never forgive him. If it weren't for him, none of this would have happened, I thought. None of it. I got a divorce later, after Henry tried over and over and over to fix the situation, to apologize, to ask for a second chance, but all I saw were empty words. There was no second chance. I tried to keep myself busy, find a way to invest my money and time, trying to get my mind off the accident. I decided to open up a toy store. I wanted to bring joy to all the children. One day, as I was standing in my store, I glimpsed a small boy standing out front, looking at a toy. The boy was alone, about 8 years old, but that wasn't all. His clothes were patched up and looked more like rags. His face and hands were dirty, and he just stood there, looking at the doll, daydreaming. I found myself walking out to him, but when he saw me coming, he ran away. A few days passed, and that boy's gaze was all I thought of. Then, one day, I found him outside the store again, looking at a different toy. I moved towards him slowly this time, till I was right beside him. Then I said, "Do you like it?" The boy freaked out and tried to run again, but I caught his arm this time and said, "Don't be afraid. I'm Susan." The boy looked at me, terrified, and I smiled. He started to relax. He told me his name was Billy, and that he was 7, and that he lives nearby. When I asked him about his parents, he said he never knew them, that he lived with Uncle Max. I asked him who Uncle Max was, but he cast his eyes down and was nervous all of a sudden. He looked a bit scared. I got curious, so I took him home with me, let him shower, and prepared a hot meal. I told him that I'd take him home after he'd eaten. I asked him about where he lived. He was quiet for a second. Then he said he had to go, that his brothers and sisters were waiting for him. I asked him how many he had. Around 50, he said. I was shocked. He told me that they all lived in a big room with Uncle Max. But how is this Uncle Max able to look after you all? I asked curiously. But he got nervous again, and he insisted that he must leave, so I decided to take him there. Maybe it'll help clear some of the mystery, I thought. I drove, and Billy was guiding the way. Until we got there. The place was a bit far from all the other houses. It looked more like a dump, with some sort of shack built on it. A man was standing in front of the door, holding a kid by the arm and beating him senseless. The boy was younger than Billy, and Billy was shaking next to me, mumbling to himself, "He's gonna hit me too. I'm so late." Then he turned to me and said, "Bye, Susan. You have to leave now, quickly." And then he ran towards the shack. I backed up the car and stood nearby to see what happens. The man hit him hard across the face, and I heard him say, "Where's the money you stole today, boy?" Billy turned out his empty pockets, and the man dragged him inside by the collar. I wanted to help, so I decided to call Henry, who was more than happy to answer my call. I told him what had happened, and he came to me. We approached the shack together slowly and looked through the window. A lot of children, ages from 3 to 7. The place was a real dump. The man was sitting at a table. It had food and drink. Billy was dragging a heavy sack on the floor, and another kid was carrying a cup to bring to the man, who snatched it out of the boy's hand. Then he got up and started waking the rest of the kids, telling them to get out there and bring him money, that they would face a real nightmare if they didn't. I wanted to barge in, but Henry stopped me. He called the police instead. The police came quickly, and they caught the man. Apparently, he kidnapped these children from parks and surrounding areas, so they could steal for him, and he would starve them and beat them. The police didn't know what to do with all the children, and I felt like this was my second chance. I told the police that I would build a home big enough, and I would take them all in, to give them the care and love that they deserve. And that is how I became a mother to 50 kids.
I don't believe in ghosts, evil spirits, haunted houses, metaphysics, etc. I only believe in science and facts. But sometimes things happen that shred all your beliefs. I want to introduce myself. I'm Lisa. I'm 14 years old. I live with my mom, dad, and grandmother. And they're all very proud of me. I'm the leader of the science club at school, and I've been the perfect student for the past 2 years. My hobbies are reading, watching educational videos, and learning. I like to discuss matters with rational people, not those who believe in myths, aliens, ghosts, and other such nonsense. I personally think these people have mental issues. One morning, my grandmother passed away. I was sad for a long time because I missed her so much. On the day of her funeral, the whole city must have come to say goodbye. While the priests were praying, I noticed something peculiar about one of the graves in the graveyard. After the prayer ended, I approached the grave in question to investigate. There was some weird writing on it. Then, a wispy, transparent, smoky figure appeared out of nowhere. It said to me, "Do not get closer to Donna Median's grave. Beware." I shivered slightly and asked the apparition who Donna was. And it replied. Who was she? She was an evil witch who liked to scare people. She was burned at the stake as a witch, but before her death, she swore a curse that if anyone ever approached her grave, her ghost would haunt that person to the day they die. I did not laugh at the apparition's warning. Instead, I turned and returned home, thinking about what had happened. On a sudden defiant impulse, I decided to visit that grave that night to see for myself if the curse was real. I took my dad's flashlight and wore a raincoat. It was pitch black outside. The place was horribly unsettling at night, but I wasn't worried at all. It's not like it was real, right? I entered the gate to the sound of howling dogs and meowing cats. My blood ran cold, and a sudden chill ran through me. I turned on the flashlight and began searching for the grave. My hands were trembling so badly, I dropped the flashlight several times. Sometimes I would step on something crunchy, and I would shine the light downward, only to see that I had stepped on an insect. Sometimes I'd see a cat here and there. Then suddenly, I heard an eerie sound close by. I froze, not daring to move. Slowly, I pointed my light towards the sound and gasped as my light illuminated a dark, shadowy figure. It was about my height and dressed all in black. I spun around and fled as rapidly as my faithful feet could carry me. I dove into bed, but I didn't sleep at all that night. I even left the lights on. The next day, when I woke up, I asked my dad if graveyards had ghosts, and he wondered why I would ask such a question. I was embarrassed and laughed to hide my fear. I told him that I was just curious. That was all. Dad looked at me suspiciously, but continued. I've heard stories, he said, that some people have seen a ghost of a girl from time to time beside Donna Median's grave. I felt my heart sink, and I asked slowly, "Is she about my height and dressed in black?" He replied, "Yes, that's how I've heard the ghost described." "How in the world did you know that?" I looked down casually and answered, "Oh, I read an article about it on the internet last night." My head hurt just thinking about this ghost thing. I made up my mind to prove or disprove it once and for all. I called my friend Laura and persuaded her to come with me to the grave. The following night, we met at the stroke of midnight at the entrance to the graveyard. Laura was shaking and constantly casting glances right and left. The weather was rainy and gloomy. The ground was muddy, and cats were meowing everywhere. It would have made the perfect setting for a supernatural horror movie. While we were looking for Donna's grave, flying bats would occasionally startle Laura, causing her to scream alarmed. As we approached Donna's grave, we suddenly heard a sound behind us. We both turned around at the same time and screamed. A ghost was glaring at us. It asked angrily, "What are you doing beside my grandmother's grave?" "Wait a minute. Are you girls?" She uncovered her face, revealing that she was just a girl, and a beautiful one at that. She told us that her name was Carmen and asked me to turn off the flashlight because it hurt her eyes. I did. Then I asked, "Who are you?" She replied, "I'm the 5th grandchild of Donna Median, the poor woman in this grave who has been wrongly accused." We both whispered back, "Wrongly accused?" She continued saying, "Yes, she was a victim of the Holocaust during World War II. Afterwards, she became a simple doctor who treated people who were afflicted with epilepsy. As usual, there are always some small-minded superstitious people looking to make trouble for others. They accused her of being a witch because they considered epilepsy to be a disease caused by a demon's touch. I come here every day to put flowers on her grave. People have mistaken me for a ghost because I only come at night. I don't want people to know I'm related to someone they think to be a witch. I don't want to be shunned, scorned, or gossiped about." I tried to comfort her and calm her a little by saying, "Don't worry, Carmen. Your grandmother's spirit may be able to rest in peace if you tell people the truth now. We live in more modern times, and there's no need to worry. I won't tell anyone about you being the ghost. It'll be our little secret." Carmen laughed. She and I became good friends after that. Ever since that day, whenever I hear someone talking about ghosts, I just look at the photo I took of Carmen and I break out laughing. Hello, everyone. I'm Lauren. Did you ever wonder what it would be like to have your life completely destroyed by someone close to you? Ever thought about what you would do then? I didn't have time to think, because that's exactly what happened to me. It all started 2 years ago. I lived a quiet life with my mom and dad and my sister. I loved my family. We were always together. We were happy until that fateful day. My dad got fired from his work, a big company. He had worked there for 20 years. The only money we had then was what he had managed to save over the years. Finding a new job wasn't easy. It was a hard time for all of us, especially my dad. He was becoming desperate. At times, he just sat there, quietly, deep in thought, and I rarely saw him smile since. One late night, we were still up waiting for him when he walked through the door. But something was different. He wasn't walking straight. It was the first time in my life seeing him drunk. I decided to take matters in my own hand. I started job hunting. I was lucky enough to find something suitable at a startup company. The pay was good enough, and the more I worked, the more I earned. I was trying my best to get our life back. I was giving it all I've got. My dad started asking me for money. I was more than happy to give him what he needed. I didn't even ask what it was for. Then he started asking for more. He came late almost every night, and he was never awake in the morning. It seemed like we hadn't talked together for ages. Then, money started disappearing from my purse. I got home from work one night. It had been a long day, and I was really tired. I put my bag in my room, and I went to the kitchen to find something to eat. I made myself a sandwich, then took it back to my room. But when I got to the door, I saw a shadow moving inside. I thought everyone was asleep, so I opened the door slightly and looked inside. I couldn't believe what I saw. My dad was standing over my bag, and my wallet was in his hand. He found no money in it, so he threw it on the bed and started going through my purse. At that moment, my mom came down the stairs. She had my dad's shirt in her hands and a small pack of white powder. I looked at her face. Her eyes were filled with tears. I tried to speak, but found nothing to say. My dad came out of my room. He saw us standing there. Suddenly, everything changed. He tore the shirt and the pack from my mom's hands. He was hysterical. He started breaking things around him. My mom and I were too scared to move, but then my sister came running down the stairs. He pulled her towards him and held a knife to her throat. He threatened to kill her if we didn't give him money. Without a moment's thought, I did what he asked. Things only got worse. Nothing was ever enough. He asked for more and more money, and if I refused, he'd get violent, beating up anyone in his path. I couldn't stand by and watch, so I would just give him what he wanted, until I decided enough was enough. He barged down the stairs one evening and asked for all the money I've got. I told him we had expenses to pay, the rent, school fees, but none of it mattered to him. He asked me again for the money and threatened me if I didn't do what he asked. I refused. He hit me so hard that I crashed my head against the wall and fell to the floor, bleeding. Everything went dark. My mom took me to different hospitals, and I had to do a lot of checkups and tests, but all the doctors said the same thing, that this was it. I was sentenced to live my life in darkness, never to see the light again. Bumping my head against the wall was one of the reasons, but apparently my psychological state played a huge role in my recovery. The doctors suggested that I'd be taken to a psychiatrist. My dad felt sorry for what he had done to me. He quit the drugs and alcohol, tried to be proper, but it was because of him that I was in this state. I didn't know if I could ever find it in myself to forgive him. I was torn inside. He was my dad, but I couldn't forget what had happened. I stopped talking shortly after, and he left, disappearing from our lives. No one knew where he was or what he was doing. A year had passed, and he came home. He sounded good, kind of like how he was before. He's trying to make up for what he had done. But to me, nothing he does makes a difference anymore. I'm still in the dark. That's something I'm gonna have to live with my whole life. I can't change that. What do you think I should do?
I don't know where to begin. I don't want to live alone. I'm fed up. I need someone to talk to laugh with, to play with. I've been lonely since birth. My name is Bella, and I'm 10 years old. And this is my story. I lived with my parents in a nice, quiet neighborhood. My father was an engineer, and my mother was a housewife. Father used to travel a lot, but my mom always stayed home with me. Father was always busy. Whenever I asked him to play with me, he'd play with me for a while. Then he'd get a phone call and leave me by myself. Mother was always worried about me. She feared everything on the street, from friends to neighbors. My neighborhood didn't have any kids for me to play with. My parents used to fight a lot. I often saw Mother with her face colored blackish blue. Whenever I would ask her about it, she wouldn't reply. I didn't have any friends because Mother didn't want me to have any. I guess she was afraid they would hurt me. I don't know. One time, my parents were sitting together.
and I asked Father why I didn't have any brothers or sisters. He told me to ask Mother, but Mother would just sit there silently, without answering. Later, there came a time when Father grabbed Mother and began beating her. I tried to pull him away from her, screaming, "Leave her alone! Let her go!" He slapped me hard, and I fell down. The last thing I heard before I lost consciousness was my mom screaming. I woke up later in the hospital to see my mom crying. She asked me if I was okay, and I nodded. When we returned home, my father wasn't there. I asked Mom where he was, but she simply said that he left on a very long business trip. I was feeling a little sad, but Mom surprised me with a doll. This was the first time that Mom had ever given me a doll. She said that doll would be like my little sister. I hugged it tightly and said to it, "Nancy, you and I are going to be the best sisters ever." Mom often left me with Nancy when she had to go out to do business. It was okay though. I felt that Nancy could understand me whenever I spoke to her. Time passed quickly. One day, Mom came home tired and went to sleep on the couch. I made a tent in my room where I collected all of my toys and played with Nancy. I was speaking to Nancy and telling her how beautiful she was and how I felt lucky to have her as a sister. Then I asked her, "Nancy, do you know why Father left us?" Miraculously, Nancy answered me, saying, "Father left you because he never really loved you to begin with." I was shocked and took 2 steps back. Then I said with a trembling voice, "Nancy, you can speak?" Nancy answered and said, "Of course. Can't all dolls?" From that moment on, Nancy and I lived in our own private little world. We didn't let anyone know about this. It was our secret. Once, when we were sitting alone, Nancy said to me, "Bella, I need to tell you something." "What is it?" I asked. Then she said the strangest thing. "You have to leave this world because you deserve a better one." That didn't make sense. Actually, it felt more like a threat. It frightened me, and I called for Mom. When she came in, I told her what Nancy had just said to me. She replied saying, "Nonsense, Bella. Nancy is just a doll. She can't talk. Maybe you're just tired. Get some sleep." So I tried to sleep, but Nancy wouldn't let me sleep. She left me alone until midnight, then she woke me up. She put her hand over my mouth and whispered, "Please listen to me. Don't scream, okay?" she said. "I know all your fears, your father's cruelty, your loneliness, your love for me, how your love and belief in me transformed me from a toy to a sentient doll. I really love you, Bella, and I want you to be happy." Her words calmed me down, and I said, "You're right, Nancy. So what do we do then?" She explained her plan to me. "In 2 days' time, we'll run away from home to a place called Toyland, where we'll meet some great friends." Whenever Mom was busy with work, I would speak and laugh with Nancy, and whenever Mom would enter the room and ask me who I was speaking to, I would laugh and point at Nancy. I could see in Mom's eyes that she was beginning to worry about me. One day, as Nancy and I were preparing our stuff to escape, we were looking at a map we had prepared. Then, unexpectedly, Mom came into the room. She saw the map and asked me about it. I looked at Nancy, and she gestured with her eyes that I shouldn't say anything. Seeing this, Mom took Nancy and threw her into the trash can. I screamed and pleaded. That was all I remember.
These things could be considered blessings from God, especially if you are very successful in all aspects of your life. You should be very grateful and appreciate all these gifts, because if you take them for granted and then lose them, you will regret it deeply. Believe me, I know. And my story is how I know. My name is Chris. I am 39 years old and am a news presenter for a local TV channel. I grew up in a poor family. My dad was a low-paid laborer, and I had no desire to follow in his footsteps, so I decided to get a job in life as fast as possible to begin earning money early in life. I first worked as a grocery clerk in sales in a packaging plant. After that, I worked at a lot of different jobs, earning money to support my family and my studies. I earned good grades at my university in the Faculty of Mass Communications, so I would have a chance at getting my dream job of being a news presenter. And I succeeded. In my first job as a news presenter for a local TV channel, it was my duty to prepare programs. Being a news presenter had always been a dream of mine. I was young and wanted to be famous and well known as a TV personality. It was not as easy as I thought it would be, but I was finally able to eventually achieve my dream of becoming a famous news presenter. I was able to move my family into a bigger house. I married a girl whom I loved and with whom I had 2 children. My life was moving along smoothly in accordance with my plans in life. But fate doesn't like happy endings, it seems, and my life took a dark turn. Once I became famous, my work took more and more of my time and energy, and the added stress required to maintain that success at work began taking a toll on my personal life. I began losing interest in my family and started ignoring them, and my friends as well. Spending too much time at work caused me to miss important things in my life, like my kids' and my friends' birthdays, my wedding anniversary, time with my parents, and intimate time with my wife. Ignoring my wife and family caused many domestic arguments. These increased over time and began to affect my work. I even began ignoring Mom and Dad, causing my relationship with them to worsen as well. Dad blamed me for seeking luxury and fame at the expense of my family. It was hurtful to hear such criticism from Dad. Eventually, he and Mom decided to leave our new flat and return to the old one. My life was being turned upside down. I became so stressed out and irritable that friction with my wife and my kids caused my wife to threaten to leave me and take the kids with her. We ended up quarreling about this even, and I drove them away as well. Fame had improved my life up to a certain point, but was now destroying my life. As I saw it, I had 2 options. Continue down this path and continue destroying my life, or accept that fate had given me a wake-up call, that I need to rethink my life and change course. Also at this time of deep contemplation, I began getting severe headaches, like migraine headaches that worsened day by day. A friend of mine recommended that I go see a doctor, so I took his advice. I went to a doctor who was quite well known, and he told me that I had a tumor in my brain. Woe is me. Was this downhill trend in my life ever going to stop? I guess not, because then he continued with more bad news. That I just had 30 days to live. I didn't know what to do. First, I called Dad. I knew that he was upset with me, as were my friends, wife, and kids. It seemed that I might be doomed to die alone. I began reminiscing about the good old days, when my nice home was filled with happiness and my children laughing, playing, and shouting. But now, it sat silent and empty. Having only 30 days to live, I felt that I needed to fix my life before it was too late. So I took action. I took a vacation from work and went to visit Mom and Dad. After hugging and talking to them, my eyes were filled with tears. Learning what I had given up in pursuit of success tore at my heartstrings. They asked about my health, and I concealed my condition and told them I was quite well. I apologized for my past bad behavior and promised them that I would change for the better. Dad forgave me because he didn't want to see me so sad and miserable, so I was able to reconcile with both of them. Mom asked about my wife and kids, and upon learning that they had left me, she said that I needed to reconcile with them too. I told her that I would do that I planned to fix everything. So I returned to our old home and was putting some flowers on the doorstep when my wife happened to open the door to find me there. I tearfully asked her to forgive me and to move back into our new home to live with me again. I promised them that making them happy would be my only purpose in life from that point forward. The strange thing is that I not only changed for the better, but I was even better than I was before things had gotten worse. I spent all my time with my parents, my family, and my friends. We met every week to gather fun and barbecue cookout parties. During my spiritual renaissance, my renewed enjoyment of life, my phone kept ringing a lot, but I figured it was just the doctor with more bad news, so I ignored it. Then one day, I gathered all the family together and told them the truth. that I was going to die very soon. It was a major shock to everyone. My wife fainted, and my parents and kids were all crying. Finally, I was ready to answer the numerous phone calls that had been coming in. They were from the lab. The lab technician informed me that they had mixed up my medical records with someone else's, and that person had died within the predicted 30 days. However, I was off the hook. They apologized profusely for their mistake and hung up. I was so ecstatic. If there's really a cloud 9, then I was there. I walked outside and looked up at the clear blue sky with my eyes full of tears, basking in the warmth of the sun and savoring the cool breeze of life teasing at my hair and face. Fate had given me another chance, and I did not intend to waste it the second time around. I would live the rest of my life as if I only had 30 days to live.
Hi, my name is Sandra, and I'm 17 years old. People used to call me Evil Eyes, not because I had a strange face, but because of my eyes. I had a genetic mutation, so my eyes were different colors. One was light gray and the other was dark brown. This effect made me look like an evil witch, a point of morbid curiosity. Whenever I would enter a public area, people would follow me with their eyes. Whenever children would see me, they would begin crying in fear. I had very few friends because people mocked whoever hung around with a freak like me. Society's negative reaction to my condition forced me to wear a light gray colored contact lens over my dark brown eyes so that both eyes appeared light gray in color. One day, a poetry reading contest was held in my area. I should have considered this to be an excellent opportunity for me because I used to be a very good poetry reader. But I stopped due to the people making fun of my eyes. So when I learned about the contest, I wasn't as excited as I normally would have been. Nevertheless, my mom encouraged me to take part in the contest. As I considered my mom to be my best friend, I took her advice. The day of the contest arrived. It was being held in the National City Theater with a panel of judges. They were some of the highly regarded poets in the country. A huge audience had bought tickets to attend the event. The competition was fierce because there were many skilled poets in there, and they were very confident. As for myself, I was worried and nervous. I wore sunglasses to hide my mismatched eyes. This was part of my presentation, but no one knew that. I could hear some people whispering behind my back, wondering why the stupid girl was wearing sunglasses inside a building. I heard a good number of silly, stupid, hurtful whispered comments. In due course, my turn came, and I went up on stage and began my reading. The audience mumbled to each other as I read. The judges seemed to be pleased. The poem I was reading was about my genetic peculiarity. At a suitable point, I removed my sunglasses to reveal what my poem was about. My mismatched eye colors. I expected gasps of shock or laughter from the audience, but nothing happened. The audience continued listening quietly and respectfully. After I finished my reading, the audience applauded warmly. Mom was crying tears of joy and pride. I was pleasantly surprised by the audience response. I honestly had expected much worse. Well, I didn't win the contest. I wasn't the best poet by a long shot. But what I gained was much more. Pride and confidence in knowing that I had faced my fear and gained acceptance from everyone there. Now I have a new nickname, Wonder Eyes. Friendship is not a word that is easily described. In fact, those who know the true meaning of it are scarce. It usually comes with a bond of trust that is not easily broken. The question is, can you believe in that bond till the very end, no matter what? My name is Sophie. I'm 21 years old. I used to live with my parents and my two siblings, Lena and Brian. Dad's an architect. Mom's a doctor. But she had to leave her job to take care of Brian and Lena because they were young and still needed her care and attention. And for a long time, so did I. As a kid, my parents were always worried about me. I didn't have any friends at school, and I was very shy. I would immediately cry when something happened, but all that changed when I met my guardian angel, Matilda. The way we met was somewhat bizarre. I did pretty well in my studies at school. I had hobbies like art and music. Unfortunately, there was this one group of girls who liked to bully people like me. One day, in science class, I was carrying a project I was working on when those girls stopped me and tried to take my project. Just when I was about to cry and let them steal it from me, a girl appeared and told them to leave me alone, or else they would have to deal with her. When they saw her, they looked frightened and left in a hurry. I didn't know the girl, but when I turned to look at her, I saw that she was a tall brunette with a beautiful smile. She took my project and held it for me because I was shaking and sobbing. Then she walked me to class and told me she would be back during break to check on me. As she was leaving, she called back to me and shouted that her name was Matilda and said that she would see me later. She did indeed come back during break. The clique of bully girls left me alone after that and kept their distance from Matilda as well. I asked Matilda why they were so afraid of her. She laughed and said it was a long story, but the short version was that she beat them up once and they became afraid of her and stayed clear ever since. I asked her how she knew that those girls were always bothering me. She said it was pure coincidence, that she had happened to be in the classroom the day they tried to take my project from me. She said that I looked so helpless that she decided to step in. I asked her to be my friend. She teared up a little and said, "Of course," and from that day forward, we became the best of friends. I was cheerful every day now, and we grew closer and closer together. The happiest days of my life. Her story was unusual. Her dad was a boxer. Her parents split up because her mom couldn't stand the thought of him risking his life boxing every day, so she left. Her dad did his best to look after Maddie and her two little sisters. Then, one day, he was killed by thieves who robbed him as he was coming home from work, leaving Maddie to raise her siblings alone. This heavy responsibility matured her and toughened her character. She taught me to be bold, to love adventures. I feared nothing with her there. I dealt with situations decisively, without hesitation. We were like two separate halves of a ship sailing in the dark that happened to find each other one night and came together to complete each other. This was how I met Maddie, and our friendship grew stronger year after year. Maddie and her sisters were like my own sisters. We were all one big happy family, until something happened that disturbed the fabric of our universe. I enrolled in the College of Engineering, while she enrolled in a different college. The first year of college was difficult for me, because I missed Maddie so much. But then I tried really hard and focused on my studies. In my third year, I met Matthew, a player on the college basketball team. During that time, I was working for the college newspaper, and I was assigned to interview him. He was smart, handsome, and had an inspiring story. His parents died when he was young, leaving him responsible for his younger brother, so he decided to work and earn money while pursuing his dream of being a basketball player. By the time we met, he had a chance to play in the NBA. We had a connection, and he proposed to me. I wanted to tell Maddie so badly, to share this wonderful news with her, but I couldn't. Maddie had completely disappeared that year, and I hadn't seen her at all. I didn't know where she was or how to reach her. Then, one day, I got a call from her. Her voice sounded distressed, maybe because her responsibilities were such a burden on her. Either way, I was glad she called. She seemed sad, and I asked her what I could do to help. I told her that I wanted to see her, so we could catch up. She agreed, and told me that we needed to get together soon. When we finally met, I saw that she had lost a lot of weight. I asked her why, and she replied that she was working while going to college. She wasn't looking after herself at all, but her eyes told another story. I told her about Matthew, and that we were getting married soon. She smiled, but her joy seemed affected somehow. I didn't know how to describe it. Perhaps it was the disconnected look in her eyes. I wanted to introduce her to Matthew, but apparently they had already met. They spoke politely to each other, but there seemed to be something between them that made us all feel uncomfortable. I didn't know what it was. A while later, Matthew was always nervous about something. He always seemed to be busy with training or games. But was that all there was? At the same time, Maddie had started acting weird as well. Something was going on between them, but I couldn't quite put my finger on it. Whenever her phone rang, Maddie wouldn't answer, or even look to see who was calling. Shortly before my wedding, Maddie had disappeared again without notice. Matthew went back to his normal self, and everything seemed to be fine. The wedding ceremony was going beautifully, until we got to the part where the preacher said, "Anyone who saw a reason why this marriage should not take place, may they speak now or forever hold their peace." Well, it turned out that there was someone who saw a reason why this marriage should not take place, and that someone did speak up. And much to my amazement, it was Maddie. She shouted that Matthew was her fiancé, and that he had deceived her and left her for me. Matthew looked at her with a perplexed look on his face, as if this was news to him. I felt like time had shifted into slow motion. I had to be dreaming. I couldn't imagine why neither of them told me this before. I looked at Maddie and asked if it was true. She said, "I'm done lying to you. I don't want to act anymore. Meeting you has been the most horrible thing that has ever happened to me. My life was going well till I met you. You got everything you wanted, even Matthew. He chose you instead." I was staring, lost for words. Tears started running down my face. "Please leave," I said quietly. Maddie was crying too, yet she smiled and walked away. I didn't understand her behavior. Why did she smile as she walked out of my life? Days later, the answer revealed itself. Matthew and I knew each other well, and what happened at the wedding did not affect us at all. Still, I could see it in Matthew's eyes. He had something to tell me, and one day, he came inside the house with tears in his eyes. I asked what was wrong, if his family was okay. He nodded and said, "They're all fine, Sophie, but there's something I've been wanting to tell you." During those times, when Maddie disappeared without warning, it was because she kept a secret from you. She had a terminal disease. She was dying. I was shocked. He continued and said that she had arranged the scene at the wedding to make me hate her, so that when she died, I wouldn't feel grief or sorrow. That she had loved me so much. Soon after our wedding day, her disease took a turn for the worst, and she died. I was still standing in shock. He gave me the letter she wrote me. "Dear Sophie, I'm sure that up to this point in time, you didn't understand my strange behavior, my sudden change. It was necessary to protect you from the shock of my death. I had no choice but to make you hate me. Don't be upset with me, dear Sophie. These are the last moments in my life, and I just wanted to tell you that I love you. Forever friends, Matilda." I cried like I never did before. I had lost my best friend. Dear Maddie, now I know the reason for your tearful smile when you left the wedding that day. You are still my one true friend. Not a moment has passed without thinking of you. Forgive me for not being there when you needed me most. You will always be in my heart.
Some people are born to have great destinies, like being a famous scientist like Einstein or a famous actor or athlete. Other people are born to enjoy great things like love, riches, or glamour. And then there are the rest of us, those who struggle all their lives just to eke by. If we should by chance latch on to a great opportunity, it will likely be very difficult to hold on to it long enough for success. We can only take our best shot, or give up and not even try. My story is about a hero. Perhaps you have met, made fun of, or loved someone like him at one time or another in the past. My name is Sam, and I am 17 years old. I live with my parents and my twin brother, Randy. Dad was a carpenter, and Mom was a housewife, but Randy is the real hero of my story. You see, he was autistic. Unfortunately, society attaches a stigma to autistic children because they seem to live in their own little world, in a kind of private self-isolation, as if quarantined from life. Due to our family's poverty and lack of access to good medical care, we never even realized that Randy was autistic. We just thought he was introverted and naturally quiet and withdrawn. I was the exact opposite, extroverted and gregarious. For the most part, we left Randy to his own devices in facing his hard life in his early childhood. When Randy and I were young, we would play in the street, and I would be responsible for protecting him because there were also some children that considered him weird and, consequently, mocked him a lot. I thought of him as a little angel because he was so quiet, and he was such a dreamer. He loved music and would often close his eyes while listening to music. He would mimic a musician playing a musical instrument for an admiring audience. I would watch his face while he was listening to music. His facial expression would change from sad to euphoric. So I saved up some money and surprised him on his birthday by presenting him with an MP3 player. He was overjoyed. One day when I was outside, Mom asked Randy to buy her some necessities from the supermarket. So he wore some earbuds so he could listen to his MP3 hands-free on his way to the supermarket. Along the way, he came across some bullies who knew about his quirky personality condition, and they decided to bully him. The gang leader grabbed Randy's MP3, threw it on the ground, and crushed it under his foot, much to the amusement of his laughing gang members. Randy was devastated and ran home crying. When he got home, Mom asked him what was wrong, but he didn't answer. When I returned home, Mom told me about Randy, so I knocked on his door. When he opened it, I saw that he had a black eye. I asked him what had happened, and he told me. I promised to buy him another MP3. One day, I heard live music playing at school, so I entered a room to see where it was coming from. It was from Randy. He was playing a violin that someone had left in the room. He looked at me, but I gestured for him to continue playing, and he did. I was entranced by his wonderful, graceful melody. When he finished, I clapped enthusiastically for him and asked him where he learned to play music. He told me that this was his first time playing music. Wow! I decided to help him develop his fabulous talent, so I told our music teacher about Randy. When I returned home, I searched the internet to learn how to make him a violin. I watched many videos and was able to make a homemade violin in Dad's workshop. Our teacher decided to allow Randy to enter the school's music contest. When I gave Randy my violin as a gift, he cried and hugged me. When he started playing the violin at home, Mom was incredulous. She hugged him and cried tears of joy upon discovering that he had such talent. On the day of the music contest, several students were laughing at him as he was walking to the auditorium, but I encouraged him to ignore them and resolved to do his best. Once he started playing, the whole auditorium went quiet and still. After a while, I could see some students actually crying due to the slow, sad, seesaw strokes on his violin strings. When he finished, he received a thunderous standing ovation. He was clearly amazed at the audience's reaction, and he cried tears of happiness and pride. Afterwards, I hugged him, and he hugged me back. Randy still has a long road to hoe in life, but Mom, Dad, and I will be there to support him on his way to the top. I believe in the metaphysical world and that there are many mysteries that we don't understand yet, like souls, ghosts, and black magic. Are there really evil spirits who wish to do us harm? Well, I may have an answer for you. My name is Ralph, and I am 15 years old. My life became a journey to study the metaphysical world. My parents always told me that reading books about the supernatural world would mess with my mind, but I didn't care. My friends share my interest in the occult. I remember the first time we tried to summon a spirit. We drew a pentagram on the floor and placed black candles at the points of the star in preparation for the ceremony. After the ceremony started, we waited for a spirit to appear, but all we summoned was a small rat. Even so, we were afraid of rats, so it was still a scary experience for us, but not in the way we expected. In our second experiment, we tried to summon the soul of a girl named Mary. Although it was a fun ritual, not much happened. The power went out and we reclosed a breaker and the lights came back on. Then, we heard the voice of a small girl crying and the voice of some woman saying, "No one can get into my forbidden area." We all screamed and ran away, but then we learned later that this was just the TV that we had heard. But that doesn't mean that supernatural events never happen. Don't forget that. In our third experiment, we tried to communicate with creatures from the planet Uranus by sneaking into a clinic that belonged to a friend's father and connecting an electrocardiograph machine to a girl's hands and feet. I thought she was going to die, but she recovered. Now, you may say that I'm experiencing hallucinations and that all our failed attempts could be explained away by normal phenomena. But what I am going to tell you may make you change your mind and your notions about the afterlife. On Independence Day, we were traveling up north to visit our aunt. Along the way, we stopped at a gas station next to a gypsy camp. The gypsies were gyrating in some kind of wild dance to the rhythm of tambourines, as if they were doing some macabre ritual of black magic and voodoo. At least that's what it looked like to me. I thought it was cool and imagined myself living the life of a carefree gypsy. Among them was a woman with tattoos all over her body. As we pulled into the gas station, she was staring at me intently, and I felt strange, as if her gaze had affected me in some way. After stopping at the gas station, Dad and I got out of the car, and I was surprised when the tattooed gypsy woman approached me and presented me with a cute black cat in a small metal cage. I knew that superstitious people feared black cats and believed them to be omens of bad luck, but personally I disagreed with them. Cats are cats, regardless of the color of their fur. I thought she was trying to sell it to me and asked her how much it cost. She told me that it was a present given to me for free. I thanked her and she turned and left. Dad finished filling up the car's gas tank and we drove away. My parents were surprised when they saw that I had magically gained a black cat in a cage, so I explained what had happened with the gypsy woman. Dad didn't like the cat's black color. He said it looked so dour and gloomy. Just as Dad said that, the cat turned its head towards Dad and hissed at him, as if he took offense at the comment about his fur. When we got home, I opened the cage and let the cat out. It walked around the flat and seemed to be looking for something. Mice, probably. I made it a cozy bed from a blanket and gave it some food. We played together for a bit. Though I had thought it cute before, its movements and features started to strike me as predatory or hostile in some way. I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but I shrugged it off, thinking that we'll get used to each other in a few days. Later, I began noticing that it had a quirky knack for disappearing and reappearing, as if by magic. At times, I would hear the cat meow as if it were glaring at something. But when I would try to see what it was looking at, there was nothing there. One evening, after visiting a friend, I went home and wanted to get some sleep. Normally, the cat would sleep beside me, but on this particular day, I couldn't find it anywhere. Suddenly, the power and lights went out, and all I could see was darkness. I heard something moving along the wall. I scrabbled around and found a flashlight and shined around. There was the cat. Its reflective eyes shined white, and its canine teeth loomed large like tiger fangs. Big and conspicuous, and ready to bite into something juicy. It was glaring at me as if I were that juicy something, but I yelled at it, and it retreated. My parents had come to see what was going on, so I pointed at Sparky. I had named the cat Sparky, and told them that Sparky seemed like he wanted to attack me. But they paid me no heed. Later that night, I was trying to go to sleep when I suddenly noticed that Sparky was lying right next to me. I broke out in a cold sweat. When I told my parents about Sparky's magical appearance at my bedside, they told me that I was just sleep deprived and that I would feel better after getting some sleep. I finally got to sleep and dreamed that I was in a dark house shining a flashlight around and that Sparky was getting ready to attack me again. I woke up with a start and found Sparky sleeping next to me. I told Mom about my nightmare, but she brushed it off as a bad dream or indigestion from dinner. Then one day, my parents had to visit one of our relatives, and so left me home alone with Sparky. I was really nervous. I tried to find Sparky, intending to return it to that darn gypsy woman, but it pulled its disappearing act again and couldn't be found. That night, my parents were outside when the lights went out again. Again, I heard a sound. Shined the light, saw Sparky with the white eyes and large fangs glaring at me as if ready to pounce on me and attack. Deja vu. I must have fainted because later I woke up to find my parents standing beside me, shaking me to wake me up. They looked worried. I told them about Sparky in the dark, ready to attack again. I asked where Sparky was, but they didn't know. We searched for it everywhere, but couldn't find it. After that day, I began feeling better. Had I been dreaming? Had I been hallucinating? Was it just my imagination? Was Mom right about my books on the supernatural messing with my mind? Sitting, I sighed and dropped my hand to my side. It fell upon something warm and fuzzy. Sparky was there.
In legends and horror stories, ghosts are typically spirits of the dead, those who suffered greatly in their lives, that when their time comes, they choose to linger in this world, to sow hatred and chaos among the living. Do you believe this, that there are vengeful spirits living among us, right here, right now? I do, and my story will tell you why. I'm Martha. I'm 19 years old, And I have a twin sister, Caroline. She wasn't just my sister, but we were best friends and subsequent partners in crime. We suffered a miserable life because we lived in poverty. Our parents were very poor, despite belonging to a rich family. Grandpa, on my dad's side of the family, worked in the petroleum industry, where he made lots of investments and projects. And fortunately, he had a lot of enemies too, many of whom were from Mom's side of the family. Dad was the middle son, but he assumed responsibility for Grandpa's work because he was very competent and capable. Similarly, Mom became responsible for her father's work. She did her best to avoid conflict between her side of the family and Dad's side, so that they could work together peacefully. It was at this point, I believe, that vengeful spirits must have come into play. My parents had loved each other since their childhood, but they didn't tell their families about it. In the past, both my grandpas were once friends and partners. They worked together within the same company, but they later became enemies and split the company into two. Both families hated each other that day forth. All of them, except for my parents. Mom's uncles took over her company and fired her. Dad couldn't bear to see Mom in this situation, so he told his dad that he was going to marry her. So his father made him choose between my mother and the company with all the power and wealth that came with it. To Grandpa's chagrin, Dad chose Mom over everything else. And so, they got married and lived together with Grandma. They faced life's problems without any support from anyone. Grandpa felt betrayed by Dad and disowned him. Then, Carolyn and I were born. Dad did his best to make us happy and give us everything we needed. Grandma told us about our family's history and how both our parents had been cut off from their families out of sheer greed and betrayal. It felt a bit unfair, but this was our life now. Then, one day, we heard Dad speaking on the phone, with Mom standing beside him, and they were both acting very nervous. He told her to take care of us, and then he left the house and never came back. Mom never told us where he went or why he left. Sometime after that, Grandma passed away. Our situation was getting worse. We thought we had to do something to help Mom. Maybe we were being influenced by those vengeful spirits I mentioned. But either way, Carolyn and I made our decision to go over to the dark side. We decided to steal, rob, defraud. We were smart enough. Together, we could definitely pull it off. We began with our neighbor, very wealthy, but very cheap. We figured she must be keeping her money somewhere in the house, since she didn't believe in leaving a dime in the bank's care and was completely convinced that they would steal her money. Lucky for us, I guess. And we were right. We infiltrated her house when she was away and found a load of money stashed away under a loose tile on the floor. Took some time to find, but we got it. When we got home, the house was completely deserted. Mom wasn't there. Her clothes were all gone from the wardrobe. We were on our own now. We began exploiting jewelry shop owners. We would pretend to be a wealthy customer and tell the owner that we wanted to take the jewelry home to show our mom and get her opinion. We would drug hotel owners and put all the money in their safe into a bag, then scream and call for help, saying that the owner had just collapsed, creating a diversion and disappearing in the crowd. We were getting quite good at it. Our wealth slowly grew day by day. Mom called, every now and then, to check that we were fine on our own. Of course, she knew nothing about our work, or what we were doing to survive. Our ultimate goal was to earn a lot of money and run away to another country to start a new life. One evening, I was with my friends, and I met a guy named Craig. He was rich, but somehow seemed different than all the people we robbed. Later I found out, to my surprise, that he was our cousin, the grandson of the man that had taken everything away from my mother and fired her. Unsure of what to do, I told Carolyn what I knew. She went ecstatic. She told me that this was our chance to take back everything, the company, the money that belonged to us. But for the first time, we didn't quite agree. Craig was nothing like his father. He wasn't greedy. He was kind and gentle. He often told me that money was a curse if it meant living alone away from people that we care about and cherish. I made up my mind, and I told Carolyn that I couldn't be a part of our evil scheming anymore, and I wanted out. And so I left her and went to live on my own. At this point, I had no idea what Carolyn was up to. In the meantime, Craig was negotiating a deal that would earn his company a lot of profit. He told me to come visit at the company and then we would go out for dinner. I accepted happily. When I arrived at his company, I sensed someone behind me. Then, suddenly a hand pressed a handkerchief over my mouth, and I passed out. When I woke up, I found Craig unconscious beside me. To the side, I could see his safe was wide open. Papers were scattered everywhere, and in my hand was the key to the safe. Then the police arrived, found the safe key in my hand, and accused me of being a thief. I told them that I had been drugged unconscious, just like Craig. The police officer looked inside my bag and found a bottle of chloroform. I was shocked, to say the least. I couldn't understand what had happened. They took me downstairs and tried to wake up Craig. At about that time, a woman in a black wig came over to me and said, "Martha, you betrayed me." It was Carolyn. I couldn't believe that she framed me. Then she left. Her betrayal hurt me deeply. A part of my brain told me that I had betrayed her first, but that doesn't matter now. When I get out of prison, someday, I resolved to get my revenge on her. We were no longer sisters. Just as we had been betrayed by our families before us, we were now locked into yet another circle of family betrayal. Only it was more personal and closer to home this time. Were they truly vengeful spirits influencing us? I think so. What about you?
I am Matthew, 21 years old, and I must tell you something. I am a madman. I need treatment. But what kind of treatment is there for my kind of madness? You see before you a man with torn clothes who speaks to himself all the time. I used to be a doctor, but I left medicine to pursue aromatology. In case you were wondering, aromatology is the study of fragrances, such as scents of flowers and how they affect people. Let me tell you my story. My parents were very proud of me because I was intelligent, well-known, and well-respected at my university. I earned high marks in all my courses. Dad wanted me to join the College of Medicine because he had always dreamed of my becoming a doctor, and I felt that I couldn't deny him that. My parents did their best to make me happy and to help me achieve Dad's dream. But to be honest with you, medicine, engineering, the arts, none of these interested me at all. They weren't my dream. I loved flowers and their fragrances, like rose and honeysuckle. I would extract fragrances from them and give them as gifts to my friends and family. They all really enjoyed these aromatic gifts. My dilemma was that I had to find a way to tell Dad that I would rather study botany, plants, and aromatology, fragrances, over medicine any day. I knew he would think that I was crazy to give up the lofty study of medicine to work with flowers, but what can I say? I have loved flowers and fragrances ever since I was a youngster. I have always been fascinated by exotic flowers and scents. Learning how to make fragrances from flowers required me to meet with a lot of people who worked in this field. One day, I had to face the moment I had been dreading because my parents had arranged a large social gathering to celebrate my success at the university and my joining the College of Medicine. Dad asked me to tell everyone about my ambitions as a doctor. I suddenly knew that the moment had come when I needed to make my startling announcement to my parents. I told the audience I had decided that being a doctor was not for me and that I was going to change my field of study. Dad looked at me with an astonished look on his face, and then he began laughing. He thought I was joking. Then I turned to him and said, "Dad, I'm not joking. I'm serious. I want to study flowers and fragrances, similar to the types of gifts I've given you before." The audience suddenly got very quiet. They could sense that this was an epiphany for my parents. The embarrassment and shock in the air was palpable. Dad looked at me and said with an affected smile, "Matthew, you were born to be a doctor. Forget all this nonsense about silly flowers." A little testily, I said, "Dad, extracting fragrances from flowers is not silly." Dad said, "Bah, forget about that." The party spirit was somewhat subdued after this testy exchange. Regardless, in deference to Dad, I began studying medicine, but most of my energy and attention was directed towards flowers and their fragrances. Sometimes I would spend time with my medical friends, and sometimes with my aromatology friends that I had met earlier. I spent my first year in medical college earning high marks as usual, but I had no passion for it. It neither excited nor interested me. There came a day when I had had my fill of medical studies and just couldn't take it anymore. So I decided to leave the College of Medicine to pursue my true passion, flowers and fragrances. When I told Dad of my decision, he was very upset, cursing at me and accusing me of being mad, insane, crazy. I repeated that I had zero interest in medicine and stated that the true madness was sticking with a field that I really didn't like at all. I moved away from home and stayed with a friend for a while before finally renting and moving into a small apartment. I faced a lot of obstacles in the beginning, but I didn't give up. I set up an arboretum by planting some flowers and nurturing them. I was working on a rare kind of fragrance extracted from a variety of flowers. I had to travel to obtain these specimens. My product fragrances weren't successful at first, but I persisted. Initially, I offered my fragrance products to various factories, but all refused my offer. So I continued in my studies. I worked in many different places. In the evenings, I would spend all my free time doing my experiments. Over time, I grew more proficient in producing unique fragrances. Then one day, I received a phone call from a famous factory. The factory owner told me that he might be interested in working with me, so I sent him some samples of my work, and they delighted him. And I was delighted that he was delighted. Thus began the lucrative stage of my new endeavor. I started earning a decent income and achieved a modicum of success in the end. After a while, I called Dad and asked him to forgive me, and he did, finally realizing that my passions were not necessarily his passions, and that I must pursue what I enjoyed the most. I have my own factory now. I achieved my dream in the end. My advice to you, the readers, is never to give up when pursuing your dreams. With persistence, you will be successful one day. So what do you think? Was I a madman to give up medicine for aromatology? Was I a madman to give up medicine for aromatology?
I confess that I love money and fame. People envy me for it, or they did. I've been a prima donna since the day I was born. All girls dreamt of being me. My father helped my brother and I achieve all our dreams. But there was one fly in the ointment, and this is my story. My name is Amelia. I'm 17 years old. My father's a businessman. My mother came from a rich family, so we were quite wealthy, rolling in dough, one might say. My brother Arthur was handsome, older than me. He went to flight school. We lived a good life without a care in the world. We had everything: cell phones, clothes, cars, servants, opportunities to travel the globe. We wanted for nothing. The most important thing was our happiness. And so my story starts at the villa where I lived with my family. My father employed many servants to attend to our every need. Martha was our head servant. She was in her 40s, funny, smart. Arthur and I loved her. Oddly, we didn't view her as a servant because she took such good care of us. Mother didn't seem to like her for some reason and was always mistreating her. Father, however, adored Martha. Once I left my iPod in the garden, and I was going to get it. On my way to the garden, I passed by Father's office, so I decided to go and talk to him. He was at his desk, and Martha was standing next to him, crying. I figured it was because Mother had mistreated her again. Father saw me standing there, and he asked me why I was still awake, and I told him about my iPod. I didn't think much of it at the time. As time passed, Mother and Martha's disputes became more frequent every day. Father wasn't home a lot, but whenever he came home, he would always ask about Martha first. One time, when this happened, I noticed that Mother glared at Father. I couldn't understand why. Father was often away traveling for long periods of time. One of those times, I noticed that Martha was always tired because Mother was making her work very hard. Mother never let her relax. One day, after midnight, I went to Martha's room to check on her, and I was shocked to see that she looked different than I remembered. I asked if she was pregnant, and she said that she was, but that I shouldn't tell anyone, otherwise she'd get fired. I didn't understand why my parents would fire her for being pregnant. A few days later, we received some really horrible news. Father's plane had crashed, and there were no survivors. We were stunned. All of us were crying, but Martha was crying especially hard. Suddenly, Martha fainted, and we took her to the hospital. Our life had changed overnight. After the funeral, Father's lawyer called us about Father's will. He came to our home and met my mother, Arthur, me, and Martha, and 2 other servants. The lawyer began reading the will. He started with Mother's inheritance, then mine, then Arthur's, and then Martha's. He looked at Martha, cleared his throat, and said in a quiet voice, "Martha, the deceased has left you 10 million to raise your child." The lawyer read the last line of Father's will, which said, "Martha's child is mine." We all gasped, but Mother suddenly lost it. Enraged, she attacked Martha as the lawyer pulled Mother away from her. Arthur was holding his head in his hands, and I was shocked. I said to Martha, "How dare you? How dare you do this to us? This is our money. You don't deserve any of it." Then I spoke to the lawyer. "Please tell me this isn't true." He replied helplessly, "Unfortunately, it is." Arthur was glaring at Martha, and he said coldly, "Martha, you are going to die." Martha looked very frightened upon hearing this. That night, the other servants helped Martha sneak out of the house. Arthur came to my room that same night and told me that we had to kill Martha. He said he knew where she was, and that her 10 million belonged to us. At first, I was hesitant to get involved. I mean, that was murder, but in the end, I reluctantly agreed to help him. The next day we made a call and hired a hitman to rid us of that disaster. Later we received a call from him. He said that Martha was no longer a problem. We smirked in victory. A few days later, the lawyer came by again. Before he could tell us why he came, we beheld a miracle. Our recently said to be deceased father was walking behind him with a servant holding a child. Arthur and I stared at him in disbelief and shock. Then we looked at each other. Arthur's face had gone pale white as all the blood drained from his face. Father was livid and said to us in an accusing manner, "The moment you thought I was dead and that I left an inheritance for Martha, you immediately arranged to have her killed. I suspected you'd try something like this. It was pure luck that I got back when I did. I missed my flight that day, otherwise I would have been dead now. So fortunately I came back early enough for Martha to call me and tell me about your death threat. When I arrived at Martha's place, she was already dead, but I called 911, and they were able to save the child. Then I immediately called my lawyer to revise my will, to leave half of my inheritance to this child. I felt like I was in an endless nightmare. The police arrived and told us that the hired killer had been arrested and had confessed and told the police that Arthur and I were the ones who hired him to kill Martha. As the policeman was handcuffing us to take us away, I thought about the irony, how Martha was dead, how her newborn baby had survived and was now the richest child in the country, how Arthur and I were going to jail, and how one small fly in the ointment had caused our ultimate fall from grace.
I don't believe in ghosts, evil spirits, haunted houses, metaphysics, etc. I only believe in science and facts. But sometimes things happen that shred all your beliefs. I want to introduce myself. I'm Lisa. I'm 14 years old. I live with my mom, dad, and grandmother. And they're all very proud of me. I'm the leader of the science club at school, and I've been the perfect student for the past 2 years. My hobbies are reading, watching educational videos, and learning. I like to discuss matters with rational people, not those who believe in myths, aliens, ghosts, and other such nonsense. I personally think these people have mental issues. One morning, my grandmother passed away. I was sad for a long time because I missed her so much. On the day of her funeral, the whole city must have come to say goodbye. While the priests were praying, I noticed something peculiar about one of the graves in the graveyard. After the prayer ended, I approached the grave in question to investigate. There was some weird writing on it. Then, a wispy, transparent, smoky figure appeared out of nowhere. It said to me, "Do not get closer to Donna Median's grave. Beware." I shivered slightly and asked the apparition who Donna was. And it replied, "Who was she? She was an evil witch who liked to scare people. She was burned at the stake as a witch, but before her death, she swore a curse that if anyone ever approached her grave, her ghost would haunt that person to the day they die." I did not laugh at the apparition's warning. Instead, I turned and returned home, thinking about what had happened. On a sudden defiant impulse, I decided to visit that grave that night to see for myself if the curse was real. I took my dad's flashlight and wore a raincoat. It was pitch black outside.
The place was horribly unsettling at night, but I wasn't worried at all. It's not like it was real, right? I entered the gate to the sound of howling dogs and meowing cats. My blood ran cold, and a sudden chill ran through me. I turned on the flashlight and began searching for the grave. My hands were trembling so badly, I dropped the flashlight several times. Sometimes I would step on something crunchy, and I would shine the light downward, only to see that I had stepped on an insect. Sometimes I'd see a cat here and there. Then suddenly, I heard an eerie sound close by. I froze, not daring to move. Slowly, I pointed my light towards the sound and gasped as my light illuminated a dark, shadowy figure. It was about my height and dressed all in black. I spun around and fled as rapidly as my faithful feet could carry me. I dove into bed, but I didn't sleep at all that night. I even left the lights on. The next day, when I woke up, I asked my dad if graveyards had ghosts, and he wondered why I would ask such a question. I was embarrassed and laughed to hide my fear. I told him that I was just curious. That was all. Dad looked at me suspiciously, but continued. I've heard stories, he said, that some people have seen a ghost of a girl from time to time beside Donna Median's grave. I felt my heart sink, and I asked slowly, "Is she about my height and dressed in black?" He replied, "Yes, that's how I've heard the ghost described." "How in the world did you know that?" I looked down casually and answered, "Oh, I read an article about it on the internet last night." My head hurt just thinking about this ghost thing. I made up my mind to prove or disprove it once and for all. I called my friend Laura and persuaded her to come with me to the grave. The following night, we met at the stroke of midnight at the entrance to the graveyard. Laura was shaking and constantly casting glances right and left. The weather was rainy and gloomy. The ground was muddy, and cats were meowing everywhere. It would have made the perfect setting for a supernatural horror movie. While we were looking for Donna's grave, flying bats would occasionally startle Laura, causing her to scream alarmed. As we approached Donna's grave, we suddenly heard a sound behind us. We both turned around at the same time and screamed. A ghost was glaring at us. It asked angrily, "What are you doing beside my grandmother's grave?" "Wait a minute. Are you girls?" She uncovered her face, revealing that she was just a girl, and a beautiful one at that. She told us that her name was Carmen and asked me to turn off the flashlight because it hurt her eyes. I did. Then I asked, "Who are you?" She replied, "I'm the 5th grandchild of Donna Median, the poor woman in this grave who has been wrongly accused." We both whispered back, "Wrongly accused?" She continued saying, "Yes, she was a victim of the Holocaust during World War II. Afterwards, she became a simple doctor who treated people who were afflicted with epilepsy. As usual, there are always some small-minded, superstitious people looking to make trouble for others. They accused her of being a witch because they considered epilepsy to be a disease caused by a demon's touch. I come here every day to put flowers on her grave. People have mistaken me for a ghost because I only come at night. I don't want people to know I'm related to someone they think to be a witch. I don't want to be shunned, scorned, or gossiped about." I tried to comfort her and calm her a little by saying, "Don't worry, Carmen. Your grandmother's spirit may be able to rest in peace if you tell people the truth now. We live in more modern times, and there's no need to worry. I won't tell anyone about you being the ghost. It'll be our little secret." Carmen laughed. She and I became good friends after that. Ever since that day, whenever I hear someone talking about ghosts, I just look at the photo I took of Carmen and I break out laughing. Have you ever dreamed of having some shocking surprise completely change your life? Whether this surprise is good or bad, your life will never be the same again. I have a story to tell you about this very thing. My name is Tiffany, and I'm 21 years old. I live with my parents and an occasional mystery guest, whose role in our lives I have yet to ascertain. I would see him from time to time. I assumed that he was some down-on-his-luck guy whom Dad helped once. Dad was wealthy and often donated money to help the poor. This mystery man would try to talk to me whenever he would spend a few days with us. I didn't understand why Dad allowed him to stay at our home sometimes. It was bizarre, and it did creep me out a little. There was one time when he opened the door to my room while I was sleeping. He sat on the bed next to me for a while and then left. I was half awake at the time, but I didn't move. When I told my parents about this, they said they would speak with him, but I'm not sure they ever did. I felt uneasy about the situation, so I decided to investigate this matter myself. I had to figure out who this mystery man was and why he stayed with us periodically. One day, Mom wasn't feeling well, and Dad drove her to the doctor's office to be checked out, leaving me home alone. I sneaked into the office to have a look around, see if I could find something about this strange man. While I was searching, I heard a voice behind me. I thought it was my parents, but it was the mystery man. He was smiling at me. It made me feel awkward. He said hi. I stepped back and said, "If you take one step closer, I'll scream." He said, "Calm down. You're suffering from an illness, and I need you to fight it for me and for your parents." "What are you talking about? I feel fine," I said. He said, "You don't recognize me. I'm your husband." Shocked, I grabbed the phone to call the police, but he stopped me. "Don't do that. I won't hurt you, but I won't leave either." I started screaming loudly. Just at that time, my parents returned and entered the study. I shouted for them to help me. Dad came over and hugged me. Then I felt a needle prick the back of my neck, and I lost consciousness. I woke up in a hospital bed, with my parents and my so-called husband beside me. I asked them what was going on. They told me that I must have been dreaming, that I had just woken up from a week-long coma, induced by a rare type of brain disease that damaged my long-term memory. My husband hugged me and told me that he loved me. If only I knew who he was. "Hi, my name is Esmeralda, and I'm 21 years old. In my country, I was a heroine, a patriotic soldier, and a role model for my generation. But every story has a dark side, and the dark side of my story is that I became a traitor to my own country. I have to tell you my story quickly because, well, you'll find out shortly. My spy career began when some terrorists attacked my country. I was assigned to a counter-terrorism battalion, and we were fighting for our lives. Though we were a strong group, the terrorists were suicidal maniacs who had decimated our troops by just charging into our midst and detonating their explosive vests. Only a few of us survived, fighting against overwhelming odds. Then, an opportunity revealed itself. I noticed that the terrorists were hiding behind some large pipes, natural gas pipelines. As a matter of fact, I shot the biggest pipe and killed them all. I became the heroine to a grateful nation, and suddenly, people were naming their children after me. Everyone wished to be like me. Then, one day, I received a phone call from an anonymous caller who threatened to kill my family if I didn't do what he demanded. So, I met with him and his cronies. The moment I saw him, I could see that he meant business. He was a no-nonsense type of individual. Sure enough, he got straight down to business. He wanted me to tell them all our military secrets, weapons, plans, base, and camp locations, everything. If I didn't agree, they threatened to kill everyone in my family, starting with my father, who lived in another city. He said he was recording our meeting, said that if I betrayed this group, they would send the recording to my leaders. I submitted to their demands, because I couldn't bear to cause my family harm. I now had to wear two faces, the heroine and the treacherous informer. I was pleasantly surprised to find that they paid me well for the information I was passing them. My own country hadn't paid me a dime for being their national heroine. So, at least I felt valued and appreciated by the other side. The utility of the information I was supplying them became evident as I watched news reports of new successful terrorist attacks on our country, military bases, camps, and armories. Naturally, our top brass knew that there must be a traitor in their midst, but they had no suspects because I was being very careful. Then, one day, as I was meeting with my terrorist contact to pass on some more information, our soldiers burst into the room and took the terrorists into custody. It turns out that my side had suspected me and had followed me there. The officer told me that I was the last person he would have ever suspected of being a traitor. I offered my hands to him to be handcuffed and taken in. I figured at least 10 years in prison, but he made no move to handcuff me. Instead, he just looked at one of his lieutenants, who then pulled out his gun, pulled back its slide, and chambered a round. It seemed that my sentence was to be executed. Right here, right now.
What do you mean that she's pregnant? I asked my father. I'm sorry, but I cannot change the fact that something happened between us and now she's pregnant. He said it as if it was a matter of fact. I know you're all wondering who I'm talking about and why I sound upset that someone is indeed pregnant. But before I continue telling you this story, I want to make sure that you would stick around. So aside from hitting the subscribe button and the notification bell, leave something at the comment section as well. Do you want me to start telling you the story from the top? Yeah, I figured. My name is Maine. I come from a well-off family. Not that I'm bragging, but that is the truth. Let's just say my life is very ideal, except for the fact that I feel alone most of the time. I don't have any siblings. My mother died when I was 5, and I only have my dad, whom I love very much. But since we only have each other, he's kind of strict. I'm 20 now, but I'm still not allowed to have a boyfriend until I'm 21. What difference would a year make? I know, right? Also, I'm not allowed to leave the house without a driver and a bodyguard. And yeah, because of that, I still don't know how to drive. And on top of it all, I cannot just invite friends over to the house, especially boys. My dad is so overprotective, and I could not count how many times I wished that he would have a new girlfriend and would remarry so I could enjoy my own life. But one day the phrase, "be careful what you wish for," suddenly made sense to me. Make sure you're ready to hear this. Hold on to something, okay? My dad got my boyfriend's mom pregnant. See, I know you have the same reaction as I did when I first heard it. How did I ever get into this mess? Well, it all started during the summer last year. Our company almost closed down. I'm not sure why. Anyway, let's not go there. I remember how my dad got so stressed over it, but he eventually won the case and he still closed deals with other clients, which made the competitor even more threatened. One time while my dad and I were jogging together, we saw a woman who got hit and run by a mini truck, so he went in her direction to help. She was not too badly hurt, but she was unconscious. No blood. Still, we're no doctors, so we called an ambulance and we went with her. My dad noticed that this woman is actually his nemesis, the one who sued him, but of course we still helped her. We left the woman when we were assured by the doctors that she's gonna be okay. We also called her family before we took off. On our way home, I told my dad that he's a good person for helping his nemesis because she was in need. From now on, I will never contradict your decisions. I will start learning about our company. I told him with a smile. Are you sure about that? You're not allowed to change your mind anymore, he said with a spark in his eyes. Yes, I promise, I said firmly. I know this would mean less hanging out and less shopping time with friends, plus he might book me for a trip abroad for some seminars and crash courses that would last for a year, but I don't mind. I know I would be the CEO of our company eventually, and it would not hurt to start early. A week later, while I was being trained by my father's executive assistant at our office, I saw a woman with an intimidating outfit storming to the reception area. She looked familiar. I excused myself and went near her so I could hear what she's asking the receptionist. I'm looking for Leo, is he here? The woman asked in a straightforward manner. I saw how the receptionist was taken aback. Do you happen to have an appointment, ma'am? The receptionist asked. I looked at her closely and I realized who she was. She's the woman who got into an accident, my father's nemesis. I do not know what pushed me to talk to her, but hi, how have you been? Are you well? I asked her sincerely. She reciprocated with a sincere smile and said, Hi, I'm good now. Thank you, but do I know you? I invited her to the empty conference room where I told her everything she needed to know. and that included who I was and what really happened to her that day. I asked her why she looked upset while looking for my dad, but she explained as follows. That morning, I decided to take a walk, and I had the mistake of wearing a piece of jewelry. A family heirloom that is roughly $1 million. I know I banged my head hard, but I'm not sure why the ring is not on my finger anymore when I woke up in the hospital. She saw how my jaw dropped. $1 million ring? That's a huge amount. I do not want to give her a lecture about how she should not have worn it while having a jog, but I didn't have the heart to. And it's not my place anyway. I'm sure she knows that, and it's not her fault that she got into an accident. Okay, maybe I feel for her because I also wear my rings while jogging. I know your father does not have anything to do with it, but I'm just hoping you guys saw something, she said with a sad tone to her voice. No, I'm really sorry. When we saw you, you were already unconscious, I told her. She did not insist on anything anymore. She let it go and left the office. That same night, Dad and I ate at my favorite fancy restaurant as a reward because I behaved like a professional during the first week of my training. I'm sure your mom would be so proud, he said, and his facial expression changed from ecstatic to really sad. Do you still miss her? I asked. Every single day, he said with a half smile. A few moments later, I saw Mrs. Judy, my father's nemesis slash the woman who got into an accident. I'm not sure what happened to me, but I excitedly called her out, Miss Judy! She was startled, but she smiled the moment she saw me. She walked into our direction. My dad and I both stood up to greet her. Are you alone? Would you like to join us? I asked politely. My dad just smiled at us, but I saw the approval in his body language, so Miss Judy decided to join us. But, oh, I'm not alone. We requested another chair from the waiter. I asked her if she's with her husband. No, dear, I'm single. I'm here with my son, she said. Oh, there he is, she said while looking at the restaurant entrance. Do you know that moment in the movies where you see a really hot and tall guy and suddenly everything is in slow motion? Yeah, that happened to me. I was out for like 30 seconds. I was just staring at him. And embarrassingly enough, my mouth was wide open and I was drooling and I had to wipe it off. Hi, I'm Randy. He extended his hand. I accepted it and we shook hands. Maine, I responded shortly. There was electricity and birds and butterflies. Do you know that warm, fuzzy feeling inside? Yeah, I know you get that. And yes, he gives me that. All throughout the night, my dad and Miss Judy kept on talking about business, and Randy and I kept on stealing glances. He's got this great, sweet, and boyish smile. I just could not get enough of him. It is my first time having a huge crush on someone, and I must be acting like a fool at that time. The night ended, and before we all parted ways, he managed to steal me away from our parents and he asked for my digits. I gladly gave him my digits like a giddy kid. That night ended pretty well. 2 weeks later, I found myself at my favorite coffee shop staring at my phone and was still waiting for his text. Will he ever text me? I should not have acted like I'm super interested in him. That might have turned him off. I left the coffee shop, went to the office, did a quick catch-up dinner with friends, and went home still waiting for his message. I was about to go to sleep, and I wanted to throw my phone out of frustration. I hate false hopes. I just buried my face on my pillow because I hate how disappointed and frustrated I was. Then I heard my phone ring. I absent-mindedly answered it without checking who it was. Hello? He said. Who's this? I asked. Hi, this is Randy, Judy's son. I hope you still remember me, he said. I bit the edge of my pillow so I would not let out a big scream. He did not hear a response for a few seconds. Hello? Just a moment, I said. Then I jumped up and down a few times to let out the overflowing giddy feeling. I let out a little scream as well. Then I talked to him again. Oh, hi, how have you been? I asked, and I do not remember smiling that big my whole life. He told me that he was very sorry that he was not able to message me right away because he got super busy with work, and he asked me if I'm available next morning. I would do a morning jog near your area. Maybe you want to do it together? He asked. In a heartbeat, I said, "Oh yeah, sure. See you then." And then he hung up. I was so happy I jumped up and down on my bed for a full minute while screaming. The next morning, I took out my most beautiful exercise gear because I obviously would like to impress Randy. He picked me up at 5 in the morning and we jogged for a couple of hours. And then he said, "Breakfast is on me." "Sure," I responded. We had breakfast at my favorite coffee shop and he ordered all of my favorites. He ain't cheap. We started sharing stories about family and business. He said that he's not the biological son of Miss Judy. Randy is actually the nephew of Miss Judy. She adopted him when his parents died in a car accident. I also told him about my story and we realized that we have something in common, and the connection is really strong. It may not be an ideal date because we were both sweating like crazy, but it was a really memorable and fun one. And ever since then, we became jogging buddies. We always have breakfast after. It went on for a while. Then one day, Randy asked if we can officially start dating. I told him that we can date, but we cannot really tell my dad yet because he would freak out. I told him about the 21st birthday thing. He found it funny, but he still respected it. With that said, we try to be careful as can be. We sometimes even went to a different town to have dinner, just to make sure that my dad would not see us. I always bribed the executive assistant of my dad, so she would let me sneak out for lunch and be with Randy for a while. So far, we've already eaten at my fancy favorite restaurants, watched movies together, went to his place to watch some Netflix, went to the mall together, partied with friends, and a lot more. Sometimes I ask my friends to lie for me. I feel really bad about it, but I'm just waiting for my 21st birthday, which is only a few months away. One time, I was having lunch with Randy near our office, but then my dad entered the restaurant with his business partners. He saw us holding hands. I know he was mad, but he just could not react right away because of his companions, but I know that as soon as I got home, he would start grilling me like a barbecue. And true enough, when I got home, he was fuming mad. He said that he would send me abroad for a while so I could forget about Randy. That night, Randy and I talked over the phone. We were both crying because we don't want to be apart from each other. That same night, my dad and Miss Judy met at a lounge inside a hotel to talk about what happened. Miss Judy was shocked to know that Randy and I were dating, but she said she likes me for her son. My dad likes Randy, but he's just really concerned about our future. They agreed that they would do everything to keep us apart, at least until we reached the right age. When Dad got home, we got into a fight because of a lot of things. "Why can't you let me have a boyfriend?" I asked. "Because I don't want you to get into trouble," he said. I was just shocked with his answer, and I gave up. I could not really argue with my dad about it. I know he means well, but I have my own life too. Randy and I are not even officially dating. We just enjoy each other's company. And if we want to make it official, we're already at that stage of our relationship. I would not hesitate because I know he's worth it. But anyway, seems like this is a lost cause. I don't really want to add gas to the fire. I agreed to go abroad. A week before my trip abroad, Randy called me and asked me to go with him for the last time to a scheduled beach where we can be alone and just create memories to be together. I immediately said yes to him. And so I lied to my dad and said that I'll spend the night at a friend's place. But then my dad's instincts kicked in and he decided to call Miss Judy and ask where Randy was. When Miss Judy said, "He's taking care of something for an event at the nearest beach," my dad instantly knew that Randy and I were together. In half an hour, my dad was already at the driveway of Miss Judy's house. He picked her up so they could follow us to the beach. Little did they know that our trip was cancelled. We went back to the city because there was a fallen bridge on the way. We decided to have dinner at the hotel instead and promised each other that we will wait for each other no matter what. I will wait for you, I promise, he said. Maybe our love is not for now, but I'm sure someday we'll be together again, Randy said. I hugged him tightly, and he dropped me off at my house. As I entered my room, my dad called me. Where were you? I told my dad that I was dishonest to him, but I apologized and I told him that I'll never lie to him again. You wait until I'm back, my dad said, and just left. I waited for him, but he was not home until 4 in the morning. I started to get worried. I tried to call him, but I could not reach him. Randy called me and said that he's beginning to worry as well for Miss Judy. We both decided to go down to the police station to report whatever is happening. The next day, my dad got home safely, but he didn't want to discuss anything that happened. I went on with my trip abroad, but Randy followed me there. I flew back home for my 21st birthday and Randy proposed to me in a very cozy restaurant. My dad and Miss Judy did not know about this. I know that they will be shocked by this news, and it may not be what they want for us, but it is what it is. Then something strange happened. My dad called and said that I should ask Randy to come over. I was very excited, and I told Randy that maybe it was the right time to tell him about our engagement. When I got home, I was smiling from ear to ear, but my dad and Miss Judy's faces were full of darkness. Randy and I were so worried for them. She's 2 months pregnant, my dad said, referring to Miss Judy. I was shocked, and Randy asked who the father of the baby was. I am, my dad said. Randy and I looked at each other, and I knew we had the same thing in mind. This cannot be happening. We cannot share a sibling, we just got engaged. My dad started telling the story of how it happened. That night that we were supposed to get away, they followed us and got stranded. And so they decided to check into the secluded beach. They started sharing stories. My dad learned that Miss Judy was not able to get married and have a baby of her own because of how much she loves Randy. She dedicated all of her time to raising him. My dad also shared the same sentiments. He said he never thought of getting remarried when my mom died because he doesn't want to make me feel even more alone. Then the night got into them and one thing led to another. As of the moment, Miss Judy was 2 months pregnant. I thought Randy and I would be the one asking our parents' approval for marriage, but funny that it was actually the opposite. Randy and I gave up our love for the people who love us the most. It is their turn to be happy. We love each other, but we do not want to mess up our family tree, so we decided not to pursue any feelings we have for each other. And that ring that Randy bought for me? Well, we let Miss Judy have it as her engagement ring. I guess it would be the new family heirloom. A year later, my dad and Miss Judy got married, and I finally had a sibling, a cute little boy that I really love.
Could you live with yourself if you found out your whole life turned out to be a lie? That you are not who you thought you were? My story may strike you as a silly Hollywood drama, but every word of it is true, I swear. My name is Tasha, and I am 19 years old. I am in the 12th grade, and I live with my family in a posh mansion. I was an only child, so my parents spoiled me by giving me everything I could ask for. Love, protection, the finest education, material things. My father always worried for my safety. He was so protective that it annoyed me, though I loved him for it. I lived the life that every teenager could only dream about. I had a car, money, and the ability to travel the world if I so desired. The only strain on my existence, as it were, was when I discovered a secret about my life, which is what this story is about. It was the first day of a new school year. The school day was over, and I was walking home with my friends when I noticed a woman standing across the street. She was watching me closely, as if she knew me. Perhaps I resembled one of her friends or relatives. This situation repeated itself on many occasions. Her stalking of me made me feel uneasy, even though she didn't look threatening in the least. So one day, I decided to exit out of the back side of the school instead of the front side. Then I peeked around the corner of the school building to observe her. She was scanning the exiting students carefully, one by one. She looked annoyed that she couldn't find me. Then I sneaked around behind her and tapped her on the shoulder. When she turned around and saw me, her face lit up with joy. I told her that I had seen her watching me every day and asked her why she was doing so. It seemed that she wanted to burst into a lengthy conversation, but instead she stopped herself and calmly handed me a letter. Then she began crying and left me quickly. I resisted opening the letter until I got home, sat down, and got comfortable. Then I proceeded to open the letter. It contained a calendar date and a simple note. Research this date and you will know everything. I browsed the internet for events that happened on that date. There were many hits. One hit was a news article about a woman who had killed her husband. Her husband had been constantly abusing her and her baby girl, so the woman had sold her daughter to a rich man to protect her life. When her husband discovered what she had done, he began beating her severely, and in self-defense, she killed him. I was shocked to read that the rich man she had sold the baby to was none other than my dad. I felt like I was in an Asian Indian movie. I'm in a quandary as to what I should do. Do you have any suggestions? Any advice? Please.
Drastic and dire situations create heroes. No one makes history unless their story is inspiring or involves great pain and suffering, overcoming many obstacles and hardships. No one achieves glory without believing in themselves and their abilities, or at least, that's what I think. Sometimes your path to making history doesn't quite go according to plan. My story is a great example. I'm Joanna. I'm 21 years old. I live with my parents and my little sister Veronica. My father was a police officer. He was very brave. He was my idol. He believed in justice and sacrificed anything to see it done. One of my life goals was to be like him. I loved to see him in his uniform. I viewed him as a hero of sorts and believed the old adage that good always triumphs over evil. Unfortunately, that rosy affirmation doesn't always hold true in real life. My father's work used to keep him terribly busy. Nevertheless, he took a few hours off on Veronica's birthday so he could be there with us. Halfway through the party, Dad's work called and told him that a thug was holding a group of nursery kids hostages, demanding a large sum of money and a means to escape the scene. Dad had to leave to deal with the situation, so he excused himself, telling us that duty calls. We were used to seeing Dad dash off suddenly at various times to deal with crimes in progress, but something felt uneasy about that particular time. Dad arrived at the scene just when his colleagues were preparing to charge into the building at significant risk to the kids. Dad volunteered to enter alone to take out the criminal before anyone got hurt. He sneaked into the building and engaged the hostage taker in a gunfight. He managed to kill the thug, but was seriously wounded. He died days later. The whole police department and the city were saddened by his loss. They held a memorial service for Dad. This senseless crime and the loss of my dad galvanized me to enroll in the police academy. Mom tried her best to dissuade me, but I refused to budge. I passed the entrance exam and worked my way through it. It was a challenging program that required diligence, persistence, and patience. The training was quite difficult at first, with very few breaks, and everyone else was intelligent and competitive. In fact, I began to doubt if I could keep up with them. But then I dreamed of Dad hugging me and telling me that I was his hero and that he would always be at my side. When I woke up the next morning, I felt somehow different, more confident, more resolved to succeed. I worked even harder, and my instructors noticed and acknowledged my extra effort. I made friends
who soon gained confidence in my abilities. My grades improved considerably. Graduation day came, and I anxiously waited to see what my first assignment would be. I was ready to tackle crime, to fight for justice, for all. Unfortunately, my first assignment was as a traffic cop. I was disheartened to see my peers get more prestigious positions, even though I had higher grades than they did. Dejected, I went home and told my mom. She encouraged me and told me that everyone had a job to do and should do it to the best of their ability. Rewards would come in time. She said she appreciated the work of traffic cops, who kept city traffic flowing smoothly during accidents and other abnormal situations. Her words helped me to accept my situation. Regardless, the work was boring, and I still envied my peers for their more important and more glamorous assignments. Life's just not fair. But remember those dire situations I mentioned earlier? Well, during one of my traffic control days, when a traffic light had failed, I noticed two black cars idling in front of a bank in a no parking zone. Initially, I thought it was the bank manager or some other VIP stepping into the bank for a quick stop. I turned my attention back to my traffic control and waved the cars waiting in the left turn lane to proceed to turn left. Then, I looked back at the bank and noticed that a man had gotten out of one of the black cars and stepped over to speak with the bank guard, standing outside the bank. Suddenly, he struck the guard and knocked him unconscious. Then the cars emptied as a group of masked men exited and rushed into the bank. These actions all occurred in quick succession. An armed robbery was in progress. I called the police station on my radio and reported the incident. The police quickly showed up and took the waiting car drivers into custody. The masked men had no choice but to remain inside the bank, with the customers as hostages. They were trapped. They threatened that if they weren't let go free with the money, they would blow up the bank and kill all the hostages. My father's life and death scene played across my mind like a movie rerun. I watched the policemen discussing what to do. I felt that I knew more about these city blocks than they did, because I spent many hours every day plying these streets, directing traffic. So I volunteered to enter the bank alone. Since this was my beat, I knew that the bank had a secret entrance that the criminals couldn't have known anything about. Thanks to my police training, I was able to easily pick the lock on the secret door and sneak in through the back. I saw two hallways, one to the left and one to the right. I decided to take the one on the left. I expected that the right one would lead me to the lobby, where the criminals were holding the hostages. As I moved stealthily, I heard a noise and discovered that I had reached the lobby instead. There were 4 masked men watching the hostages, who had been tied up. Then, I spied a bomb in the midst of the hostages. These guys were definitely serious. One of the hostages spotted me, and I gestured to him not to speak or look at me. Unfortunately, one of the thugs had already noticed the hostage looking in my direction. He looked over and saw me. I fired and hit him in the shoulder. I knew the shot would cause the other policemen to rush in, so I needed to distract the masked man quickly. One criminal was holding a hostage in front of him, and he told me he would kill her if I didn't put my gun down. I lowered my gun to the floor, stood up, and raised my hands. All the masked men were watching me with their backs to the main entrance. Just as I was about to get shot, the police squad rushed in and told them to freeze. The thugs surrendered. The hostages thanked me, and the police chief thanked me for risking my life for the hostages. The next day, the governor called me into his office and praised my bravery and dedication. He surprised me by transferring me from the traffic control division to the crime prevention division. I felt my father's spirit watching me at that moment and smiling with pride. My friends began calling me the Girl of Steel, and I was perfectly okay with that.